Now 6 o'clock, and I want to call the meeting to order. Board members, I want to recognize the member of the board. And under the provision of the board meeting law of the state of Missouri, the board must adopt by roll call vote an agenda that includes the time, the date, the place, tentative agenda for the meeting, a copy of the notice and agenda for this meeting was posted on Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 on the district website and at the administration center located at 8855 Dunn Road in Wood, Missouri. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as posted?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Bush? Yes. Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Tyson?
Yes.
Secretary votes yes. Madam President?
Yes. Thank you. Just want to remind each one of the board members, if you're speaking, to turn your mic on. Other than that, you can turn your mics off. Also, I just want to say welcome to everyone. This is a special meeting of our board work session. And before we truly begin, I want to say, first of all, I want to recognize that this is Black History Month. With that being said, I want to recognize the Divine Nine, America's Black fraternities and sororities that have been a unique and vital part of African American history. They all stand for the proliferation of education, collegiate matriculation, and the service to our communities and to our nation. If there are members of the Divine Nine in our meeting, please stand when I call out your fraternity or sorority. And I will begin with the sorority of the first of our Vice President of the United States, our first Black Vice President of the United States, who I'm also a proud member of with her, sorority of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. It's the first Black sorority founded in 1908. Are there any Delta Sigma Betas in the audience? Theta Phi Beta, Sigma Gamma Rho, Alpha Phi Alpha, Iota Phi Beta, Omega Psi Phi, and Phi Beta Sigma. Just a little point for Black History Month. And I want to invite each one of our board members to present a Black History fact in our February board meetings in the future. Okay, thank you again for your focus to all of you who are sitting in our audience today on getting our students back in school. And for your commitment and for your hard work. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for all that you have done. I also want to take this time to welcome our new board member, Pastor Terry Tyson. I'd like to recognize that Dr. Courtney Graves was re-elected to the board, so we want to recognize her. Okay, with that, let's get started. So I would like to have our reentry discussion. And so the Board of Education Administration will discuss our reentry plans. And we will start with Dr. Davis.
So the team is going to be presenting this evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. The team will be presenting in just a moment. And this is certainly out of the protocol of what we're going to be doing. I just wanted to take this moment to recognize one of our principals. Today is her birthday, Ms. Heather Carroll. And I know she's not in this room, but she's in one of the rooms. So let's give her a round of applause.
I'm sorry, can I just also recognize Leslie Haunton, who's not with us, but she is, and yes, on our Zoom.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education, cabinet members, administrators, staff, and community members. Tonight, we're here to share our reentry plan. What you see is a culmination of the work that began this past July and continued over the course of the next several months. During that time, plans were revisited and refined. This past November, we reconvened the task force. The task force was comprised of 6 subcommittees made up of administrators, teachers, and cabinet members. These subcommittees were as follows: health, safety, and facilities, mental health and social well-being, staffing, human resources, teaching and learning, transportation and meals, and communications. We had 3 guiding principles as we worked to develop the original plan further. 1, the health, safety, and well-being of the students and adults is paramount. 2, educational equity will be at the forefront of our decision-making. And 3, teachers and staff will prioritize deep, meaningful relationships to create safe learning environments for each student. All cabinet members, administrators, including assistant principals and instructional support specialists, have completed the Johns Hopkins contract tracing course. We have heard from Dr. Newland, Washington University pediatric professor on the St. Louis Regional Task Force, to further understand the data and science supporting reentry into our schools. We've listened, we've surveyed multiple times. We've partnered, visited, and worked alongside a number of surrounding districts to hear lessons learned. We've read and reread plans from across the country. We've done our due diligence to ensure that we have the best for our staff and students. In collaboration with our various departments, what you will see this evening through the information to be presented and the corresponding visuals is a reentry plan centered around students with our guiding principles at the forefront and ultimately providing choice for our families. This would not be possible with our united effort throughout the district. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jadali.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Good evening, Board of Education. We continuously provide updates to our community regarding the status of COVID-19 in our district. And I'm assuming this slide will start rolling. A little more than that. Okay. And once we click on the district website, as we scroll down, you will see that we have a COVID-19 widget that our families can see list of positive cases for the past 7 and 14 days for the staff and our community. Once we click in the bottom of the screen, which is that hyperlink, you will see an additional information. And once we click next, please. You see additional information that will become available for our viewing, our families, and our communities, and they can see it. And we are right now, and click one more time, there are a lot of information currently housed in the site. However, we are working toward enhancing this widget to encompass daily updates for each of our schools and districts. Next, I will be sharing 4 indicators related to the analysis of COVID-19 pandemic in our district. Rate of test positivity, which is percent of positive tests, 7-day average new case rates, transmission rate, which refers to the number of new cases of COVID that will result from each existing case. As an example, a transmission rate greater than 1 indicates that there will be an increase in the rate of new cases. And vaccination rate, which is the percentage of the population that has received both doses of the vaccine. We will compare data from the state of Missouri, St. Louis County, and zip codes serviced by Ferguson School District. Next, on this slide, will display the transmission rate specific to the greater St. Louis region. Rates have dropped slightly from 1.11 to 1.05 over the past 2 weeks. This indicates that for every 100 current cases of COVID regionally, 105 new cases will result. Next, we are going to look at and see the daily percentage of PCR tests taken that have had a COVID positive result in San Luis County, calculated by using the all tests performed on a given date as the denominator and positive test outcomes as the numerator. The current weekly average positivity rate is 8.6%, with the most recent daily positivity at 8.4%, placing FFSD in the category of higher risk of transmission in its schools, according to the CDC guidance. The data which you are reviewing is derived from the St. Louis Education Task Force. This is the percentage of positive tests in total, rather than the percentage of positive tests per day. This reflects the percentage of positive tests since February 2020. We can see that FFSD comes in at 8th highest in positive tests among many of our neighboring districts. Beginning July 1st, the Harvard Global Health Institute launched a key matrix of COVID suppression framework to provide clear guidance of how to target and suppress COVID-19. HGHI guidance is based on the normalized matrix of a 7-day rolling average of daily new cases per 100,000 people. This is also the guidance currently endorsed by the Education Plus. According to HGHI guidance, daily new cases of less than 1 people indicate a risk level of green and on track for containment. An average of 1 to 9 new case daily indicates a yellow risk level where community spread is occurring. An average daily new cases reach between 10 to 24. The risk level is orange, meaning with accelerated spread. At this level, stay-at-home orders are advised. An average of 25 or more new cases daily indicate a red risk level where stay-at-home orders are necessary. This graph displays the 7-day rolling average of new case per 100,000 people applied to the 10 zip codes served by the First and First School District. Risk levels are indicated by the background color in the graph. New case rates have fluctuated greatly since the beginning of the new year, but have declined somewhat overall. The current rate of new cases in FFSD is 31.95, which is down from 35.78 1 week ago, but still within the red risk level. This table shows the 7-day average new case per 100,000 in each zip code served by FFSD for the last 2 weeks, as well as percentage change from last week to this week. 7 out of 10 zip codes served by FFSD currently have 7-day average new case rates in the red risk level, indicating critical spread. There has been an overall decrease of 10.7% in new cases from last week to this week, placing FFSD at a lower risk of transmission in our communities per CDC guidelines. Vaccination rate data is derived from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. Between 70 to 85% of the population must be vaccinated to diminish the spread of COVID-19. Currently, 6.7% of residents in the state and 6.4% of the residents in St. Louis County have received the first dose of vaccine. Just 2% of the residents of the state have received both doses. Statewide, the age group with the highest rate of vaccination is those who are 85 years of age or older, with 20% of the population vaccinated. To recap, I shared transmission rate data and referred to as the number of new cases of COVID that would result from each existing case. It was also noted that transmission rate greater than 1 indicates that there will be an increase in the rate of new cases, and COVID will continue to spread quickly. Also, positivity rate was referred to the percentage of positive tests relative to the number of tests performed. In addition, new cases were explained and measured as a 7-day average of new cases scaled to a rate of cases per 100,000 people. We have also referenced vaccination rates. New case rates in FFSD have decreased from 35.78 to 31.95, which is a 10.7% decrease over the past week. The transmission rate is 1.05, and the positivity rate is 8.4%. New case rates placed places FFST in the red risk level, with transmission rate indicating continued spread. Only 2% of the necessary 70 to 85% of the residents are vaccinated. Each of those four indicators place FFST at a higher risk of transmission of COVID-19 in our communities at current levels. At this time, I will yield to Mr. Kevin Hampton, Executive Director of Community and Marketing, to discuss timelines.
Thank you, Dr. Jadali, and good evening, board. We've prepared a possible timeline for our students and staff to return to school. This timeline is based on pre-K 5 students returning to in-person learning on March 1 and 6th through 12th grade students returning on March 15. As you know, there are so many facets to this return to school buildings, and we have anticipated what is required to make this happen. It's also important to remember that so much hinges on the number of students who remain virtual. At this time, Laura Madrusik, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, is going to come and share an overview of the work that our food service staff will be tackling to prepare for students.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton, and good evening, board and Dr. Davis. As our students return to school, the district will continue to provide meal service for all of our students. Our food service operations will be running a dual meal distribution for both our virtual learners and for those students who return to school in person learning. The photos you will see in these next few slides are pictures of our food service and bus drivers in action. They continue to do hard work every day for our students, and I want to make sure to acknowledge them for all that they do and will continue to do when we return to school. For our virtual learners, 5 days worth of meals will be delivered on buses on Fridays using the current delivery schedule. Meals will continue to be prepared by our food service staff at both McClure North and STEAM Academy and McClure South Berkeley on Fridays when students are not in the building. The district offers both prepackaged and fresh food that is packaged into individual containers. Once the food is prepared, it is loaded into the boxes by our food service staff, and then the drivers do load those boxes into the buses. The district currently has 34 buses and 85 stops along the routes. There is a stop designated at each school, and then there are various stops along the way, including apartment complexes that house a large number of our students. The delivery schedule with times and stops can be found on the district website. We currently give out 1,520 boxes per delivery day, which equates to 28,089 breakfasts and 28,089 lunches per month. Due to the USDA and DESI compliance, virtual students will be provided a meal pass that they will be required to show to staff when they pick up their meals. This will ensure that a box of meals is provided to our virtual learners only. The in-school students' meals will be accounted for at the schools each day. Meals will be sent home with students for days that they aren't participating in asynchronous learning. For our students who are attending school in person, those students will be provided a breakfast and lunch while they're at school. Meals will be grab-and-go items and will be packaged and distributed in bags with handles that can easily be picked up and taken to the designated eating areas. Because every school does have a different setup, each principal has a designated area for students to eat. The examples that we are going to discuss tonight are our typical service for each grade level, and so each school will be different, and they will include that specific information for the school's meal service in their particular school handbook. A breakfast and lunch item will be sent home with the students on Thursday evenings, so the students will have a breakfast or lunch on asynchronous learning days. For our high school meal service, students will pick up their breakfast as they come into the building for the day. Food service staff will tally the meals taken for DESI and USDA compliance. Students will not be required to enter that information into the student system. The students will then take their meal into the designated eating area, and an example of an eating area at the floor north would be like the cafeteria, the snack bar area, or the upper and lower advisement areas. Once they eat their breakfast, they will go directly to their first class. Lunch will be held in several shifts, and that depends on the number of students that will be attending in person. Students will come down to the lunch area when they're dismissed from class for lunch, will pick up their meal, and will eat either in the cafeteria or the snack bar area. Students will be expected to throw away any uneaten food and trash in the trash cans that are located in the eating areas, and food service staff will disinfect the tables in between the lunch shifts. Sixth grade center and middle school in-person meal service will be very similar to the high school process. Students will pick up their bag lunch and will be directed to eat at specific tables within the cafeteria or designated eating areas. Some schools, such as Cross Keys, which was our sample here, will have 2 designated eating areas. The cafeteria will be the main location where students eat, and a gym will be the second location for students to eat. For elementary school, a large number of elementary school students will be eating breakfast and lunch in the classroom. Breakfast will be waiting for the students when they arrive at their classroom. Staff, or we can also have our older grade student ambassadors, will bring lunches to the classroom using our rolling coolers. For DESE compliance, teachers will use the Sys-Tyler system when taking attendance to account for every student who does eat a meal. Students will eat at their desk, will throw away their meals in the big trash cans with liners that will be available in each classroom. After the student has eaten their meal, they will throw away their trash, disinfect their desk, and the trash can will be moved into the hallway for our custodian to empty after each meal service. In conclusion, we have met with every one of the principals to discuss their meal service, and we do have a preliminary plan in place for each location. We've also discussed that this meal service could and probably will need to be tweaked or changed once our students do return to school, because we know that there's going to always be something that just doesn't happen right, and we want to ensure the safety of our students. This can be monitored or will be monitored and can be updated as needed. At all grade spans, administrators and teachers will require students to wear their masks unless they're actively eating and drinking. I will now turn this presentation over to Amy Cacciatore, who's our Executive Director of Student Services, who will discuss parent declarations for their students.
Thank you, Ms. Madruzek, and good evening, Board of Education. Parents or guardians will be asked to declare their desired learning model for their child by responding to a questionnaire pushed out through their parent portal. The ask will be to state their desire for their child's education to continue on with virtual learning or to move to in-person learning. Pending the Board of Education's decision, in-person learning for students in grades pre-K through 5 will begin on March 1 and on March 15th for students in grades 6 through 12. Both virtual and in-person learning will occur synchronously Monday through Thursday, with Friday remaining as virtual asynchronous learning for all students. This declaration will be available on the parent portal beginning February 11th and will close at 12 a.m. midnight on February 15th, pending your decision. School handbooks are available on the district website and will also be linked in the declaration announcement sent to parents and guardians. The handbooks will provide essential information regarding re-entry as it relates to the district plan and individual school plans. Participation in bus transportation for those students who meet the eligibility criteria of a bus rider will also be requested. The parent portal has the ability to connect this information to both the individual student and the family, and will also store the declaration in the Documents tab in our student information system. The parent portal login is located on the main page of our district website and will also be linked in the declaration announcement sent to parents and guardians. Once logged into the parent portal, an initial daily announcement will display alerting a parent or guardian. The learning model form will display in a yellow banner with a red exclamation point. Parents will click View to open the document. If there are multiple children in a family, a separate form will display for each child. If the desired choice is virtual, parents will select the virtual box and select Submit. If the choice is in-person, parents will select the in-person box. When the in-person box is checked, another set of questions will display regarding transportation. Once that selection is made, parents will select Submit to record their choice. This process will be completed for each student in the family. Additionally, Missouri state law mandates that all students be in compliance with the standard 2020-2021 Missouri school immunization requirements. A COVID-19 vaccination is not a school age immunization requirement. Currently, there is no approved COVID-19 vaccine for children. All students must present documentation of up-to-date standard school age immunization status before attending in-person learning in the state of Missouri. Communication regarding immunization requirements and compliance has occurred frequently through email, text, and/or phone calls from the district nurses. I will now hand it over to our Director of Transportation, Mr. Kevin Perron.
Thank you, Ms. Cacciatore. Good evening. To better illustrate what transportation will look like in our district, I'd like to show a short and detailed video that will explain the transportation process. This video will also be shared with the students and parents of our district to provide the expectations on how we plan to keep students safe. Welcome, Ferguson-Florissant students, families, and community to the Transportation Department at Ferguson-Florissant. Today we are going to go over the procedures that we are going to follow when we go back to school. My name is Kevin Perron, Director of Transportation.
I'm Keith Pendleton. I'm the Assistant Director of Transportation here at Ferguson-Florissant School District.
We are going to go over the load, unload, how it looks at a bus stop, and how it looks on a school bus while we ride. In the AM, while waiting for your school bus, waiting to load, wear your mask. Keep social distancing while at the school bus stop. Load single file, one by one. When you come to the first step, allow that other child to get to the top before you load after them. Make sure you use your handrails. When you get to the top, the bus driver will explain what to do. If you need some hand sanitizer, they will offer that to you. Morning, Mr. Keith.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good, good. There's some hand sanitizer for you.
All right.
All right, go ahead and have a seat.
When loading a bus into AM or when loading a bus at the schools, we will be loading from back to front. We will put children in the seats that provide the most social distance possible. So when we get to the schools, we will do it opposite. We will load from the front to the back. In addition to our unload and load procedures, drivers this year will have tablets that will be able to take attendance of your child riding our school buses. This will assist in contact tracing if we need it. It's going to look exactly like this. It will display the stop and the students at that stop. As the driver pulls up to the stop and the child gets on, they will check that child in by tapping the screen. Once we find all the kids and we check them on, we'll be able to go to the next stop. We tap down there, it will automatically take us to the next stop and pull up the next students that will be at that stop. Also, please be aware of the 270 traffic this year. While construction is going on, we will be adjusting our routes accordingly to the delays that will be occurring. We will make adjustments if our buses get too crowded and keep our children safe at the Ferguson-Florissant School District. Thank you for joining me. My name is Kevin Perron, Director of Transportation.
I'm Keith Pendleton, Assistant Director of Transportation. Have a safe day.
Thank you for your time. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Terry O'Neill, the Executive Director of Operations, Maintenance, and Security.
Thank you and good evening. In preparation of the reopening of schools, we have done several things and have several more items to do based on the number of students that will be in attendance each day. This will include HVAC, cleaning, hand sanitizing, masks, barriers, and social distancing. During the summer and school closure, we have maintained and have made adjustments to our HVAC systems based on the pandemic. We have inspected each system at each location for proper function, temperature, regulation, airflow, air quality, filtration, and ventilation. This slide shows McClure North High School, which has our newest boilers. We recently cleaned all HVAC systems thoroughly and have used disinfectant antibacterial cleaner on the coils of the HVAC system to ensure there are no bacteria or virus on the coils or in our system. Our systems provide 4 air changes per hour. Every 15 minutes, air is removed, filtered, and recirculated. This is much more often than any home and more often than most businesses. The air is filtered through a highest rated filter possible while not restricting our airflow. We use a filter rated MERV 8. Higher ratings create issues with constricting airflow to much of our systems. So we are following recommendations for air filter replacement as well. Based on the recommendations from the manufacturer and CDC, We have increased the outside airflow from 10% to 20%. This is high as recommended for safety while still providing the best possible air quality, flow, and temperature. The graphic illustrated on the screen is how our HVAC systems work. On the left of the illustration, you'll see that the outside air is brought into the HVAC system. And you'll notice it's marked 20%, which is an increase of 10% due to the pandemic. Combined with the recirculated air, both are then filtered, sent through the coils to heat or cool the air, then sent to the building and rooms to heat and cool them. The air is then again recirculated out of the room and returned. This is a continuous process all day with the air being changed out in every room every 15 minutes, then sent back through the system to be mixed with outside air, filtered, heated and cooled, and sent to the building again. We have tested our quality in our buildings, the air quality in our buildings, multiple times. From 2005 through 2019, we have tested air quality, which was performed by a third-party vendor in 68 separate areas or locations. The test collects data on 24 spores and allergens, and the results are presented in an account of those spores and allergens that were present in the area at the time. The average indoor quality count for FFSD buildings is 324. To give this number perspective, they are also tested the outdoor air quality at that location. The average count for FFSD buildings outside is 18,231. As an additional comparison, we also use St. Louis County Health Department's daily counts as well. The average for them was 13,000. Air quality is 98% better than in our buildings than the quality of the outside or fresh air in all of these tests. This is worth repeating. FFSD count 324. Outside count 18,231. St. Louis County outside 13,000. The air quality in our buildings is 98% better than outside or fresh air. This is mainly due to the fact that our system filtered the outside air before it is distributed to our buildings. And as mentioned earlier, the air is changed every 15 minutes, refiltered along with additional outside air, both through a high-rated filter. This is also why we do not recommend opening windows. Open windows bring in these spores and allergens unfiltered into a room since it does not go through our filtration system. The custodial staff have been in the school since summer, deep cleaning and disinfecting to prepare for the return of our students and staff. They have completed deep cleaning, which includes stripping, cleaning, and waxing floors, cleaning carpets, moving furniture and other items to clean and disinfect the entire building. They have used disinfecting and cleaning products approved by the CDC and the FDA. Since some staff have returned to the building, the custodial staff have been performing daily cleaning, including cleaning and disinfecting high-touch areas throughout the day, focusing on areas where staff are present and areas staff are using on a daily basis. When students return, daytime cleaning and disinfecting will include disinfecting and cleaning high-touch areas and items, emptying trash, assisting with lunch and breakfast in classrooms, like spills, food debris, and trash, and checking, cleaning, and restocking restrooms during the classroom periods, and restocking hand sanitizing dispensers. Every evening, the custodians will perform deep cleaning, which includes cleaning and disinfecting all areas, mopping, vacuuming, dusting, wiping and sanitizing surfaces, cleaning restrooms, hallways, offices, and gyms. We are able to purchase electrostatic sprayers for every school, which can be used on larger items in areas like gyms, classrooms, and locker rooms. These will be helpful with the nightly deeper cleaning. This picture on this slide is our actual custodians performing some of these tasks. During our cleaning process, we removed all porous and/or cloth and fabric items from classrooms. These items are an issue due to being difficult to clean or disinfect and remove any contaminants from the virus. We have placed these items in areas where teachers will have access to the items if they are their personal items, so they can be removed. These items include things such as area rugs, pillows, cloth fabric seating, draperies, stuffed animals, and other such items. In addition to the hand sanitizing dispensers already in restrooms and all sinks in the school buildings, we have recently purchased freestanding hand sanitizing dispensers for every classroom in the district. This is in addition to the 600 wall-mounted hand sanitizing dispensers recently installed throughout the district in main entries, exits, main offices, hallways, gyms, and cafeterias. We have installed 1,552 additional hand sanitizing dispensers in our buildings recently. We have a good stock of refills for the dispensers and hand pumps available and have additional supplies on order for future use. Masks are required. We will require that everyone entering our building wear a mask that they provide, including students, teachers, and all staff. However, we do have a limited number of disposable and washable masks for both children and adults available for those that may need one. We have installed clear protective barriers for high traffic areas, mainly involving visitors. We currently have installed the barriers at security desk and areas and main offices counters. We will continue to install the additional barriers as needed before staff and students return. In most cases, we will mark seating or desks so that students are 6 foot apart for proper social distancing in each classroom. Our staff has begun marking desks with a placard showing a desk with a red X through it for the lower grades and one that reads "Do not use" for upper grades. We are placing these generally on every other desk, but are assuring the proper social distance is in place at each seating location. The number of desks or seating in a room will be based on 2 items: size of the classroom. Our average allows 11 to 15 per room, and the number of students that will actually be attending class in person based on the parent preference. Once this is determined from the parent selection, we will begin the process of marking the desk and seating in each classroom. Generally, using every other desk meets that social distancing requirement for our schools. We have social distancing floor decals that will be placed outside in the main office and outside restrooms. We have begun placing blue lines for the food distribution for breakfast and lunch based on each school's plan for meal distribution. We will also mark the outside entry with painted lines 6 foot apart. Once we have determined the number of students, meal distribution, and other items, maintenance staff will complete installing the decals and markings. Many of these items presented will require several days to prepare and put in place once the decisions are made related to returning to school and the number of students. Now, Diane Brown, District Nurse Coordinator, will speak on health services.
Good evening, Board of Education. During the re-entry process, it is the goal of the Health Services Department to provide safety and support to all students and staff, along with all the other safety measures that the district has in place, such as screening, wearing face masks, social distancing, and hand washing. Additional practices have been put into place for the health room. Each health room has been reviewed for safety in accordance with the CDC recommendations. Procedures have been developed to ensure that social distancing will be maintained in the health room. If a student or staff member arrives at school with symptoms of COVID-19 or develops symptoms during the day, the Health Services Department will follow guidelines that have been provided by the St. Louis County Health Department to ensure a safe environment for everyone in our buildings. Communication prior to a student being sent to the nurse must take place. This communication may look different in each building, but should ensure that confirmation from the nurse takes place prior to the student being sent to the health room. Some examples of this would include walkies, Google Chat, phone call, or a Google form or calendar. Visits will be prioritized based on emergent needs. Non-emergency visits or procedures will be scheduled in advance to help decrease the number of students visiting the office at any one time. A quick at-the-door assessment will take place prior to the student entering the room so that the nurse can determine if the student should enter the health room or may need to wait in a separate room and be picked up. Isolation rooms have been designated in each building. These rooms will be set up to adhere to social distancing guidelines that have been put in place by CDC and the St. Louis County Health Department. Students who are waiting to be picked up will need to be monitored for safety, and proper PPE will be provided. Nurses and clinic aides have already completed the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course and have been trained on the procedures that should be followed if a staff or student should be compelled at school. This training included algorithms and decision-making tools, as well as a very detailed guidance that was provided by the St. Louis County Health Department. Forms and tracking tools that have been shared with us by the Health Department guide our contact tracing practices and the communication that takes place with county health. In addition to the annually required staff training, the nurses will also provide important training to school staff regarding the procedures that are in place for student health visits, as well as review a decision-making tool that can be used when deciding if a student needs to be seen in the health room. This tool includes some common reasons that students visit the health room and give guidance regarding how these situations can be addressed. Based on the CDC guidelines, personal protective equipment, including gloves, gowns, masks, face shields, and protective eyewear will be provided to all nurses and clinic aides. This slide depicts a few of our own district nurses donned in PPE. School health services employees have been included in phase 1A of vaccination distribution and have been offered the opportunity to sign up to be vaccinated. Phase 1B, tier 1 and 2 have already been activated, and I have included information about those two tiers on the slide. I've highlighted phase 1B, tier 3, because that is where school systems fall in vaccination eligibility. We are currently waiting for this phase to be activated. This will include all teachers, faculty, and staff in public and private schools, as well as child care workers. Staff members have received an email sharing information about how to sign up to receive vaccination through the St. Louis County Health Department, as well as links to the area's major healthcare networks. Staff and community members are encouraged to register to receive the vaccine and can be vaccinated when they are eligible. They will be contacted by the provider that they registered with when they are eligible based on the phases and tiers that the state of Missouri has put in place. Now you will hear from Philip Boyd, the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resource Services.
Good evening, Board, Ferguson Force, and community. In order to create an equitable situation, all teachers will teach from their respective classrooms. Any individual health concerns will be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Any consideration regarding medical conditions will be based on medically supported information from a staff member's healthcare provider and relevant information from the county health department. Also of note is that currently our region is experiencing a shortage of available substitute teachers. Our third-party vendor, ESS, continually tries to recruit more substitute teachers for the subpool and post on several recruiting websites. Staff concerned that an underlying medical condition may be impacted by in-person instruction should contact the Office of Human Resource Services. Any request for accommodation will be assessed under the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA. As previously stated, both information from a medical provider and information from the county health department will be used to determine whether a staff member's condition will limit their ability to perform their duties in person. Staff members should contact HR if there may be a need to take leave under the Family Medical Leave Act, also known as FMLA. Staff who are not medically excluded from in-person duties will need to request a leave of absence from the district. Typical teacher absences will be filled by guest teacher assignments or aides where appropriate. If a teacher is quarantined and is not experiencing a debilitating medical condition, then that teacher will continue to teach their classes virtually. A guest teacher or aide will be assigned for supervision and assistance in the classroom during the time period that a teacher is quarantined and providing instruction from home. You will now hear from Dr. Deanna Kitson, Assistant Superintendent of School Leadership. Oh, apologies. You will now be hearing from Ms. Shantana Hurd, our Director of Early Childhood Learning.
Good evening, Dr. Davis, members of the board, and the community. My name is Shantana Hurd Luckett, and I am Director of the Early Education Program. This evening, you will hear plans for student reentry and pre-K agility. While much of the information will be consistent for all students in pre-K2, it is important to recognize the uniqueness of the early education department. Our recognized and renowned early education program has provided a quality early learning experience for many years with a focus on serving families and meeting the developmental needs of students beginning at birth and going through age 5. Early education classrooms are located in all 7 of our PK2 buildings. Upon reentry, we plan to once again provide developmental screening, early childhood special education diagnostic testing, and parents and teachers services for students and families at both welcome centers. As we continue to plan for the reentry of students, it is our intent to continue to provide exceptional services while ensuring the safety of students and teachers and holding true to our core values and understanding that students learn best through play and hands-on learning experiences. As I mentioned, it is important that we recognize the uniqueness of the early education program and the way in which young children learn. When students return, we want our children to return to an environment that will best support this while following CDC and St. Louis County guidance. Shortly, you will hear specifics on student reentry from Leo Ganal, principal at Walnut Grove Primary School. I want to point out a few key pieces that will look different. The first will be the way in which teachers will deliver instruction. Data from student learning declarations will be analyzed to determine how many students will return to in-person learning and how many will remain virtual. Once that number is determined, we will identify teachers that will teach students in person and teachers that will teach students virtually. It is important to note that both groups of teachers will be expected to teach from their classroom. Early education teachers and therapists have done a phenomenal job delivering virtual instruction. Keeping in mind the way in which young children learn, separating the 2 groups and allowing teachers to focus on either in-person or virtual students will ensure quality instruction continues, maintain high student engagement, and positively impact the social and emotional development of students. Please keep in mind our class sizes are half of what a typical elementary class looks like. In addition, relationships are paramount to our success. Recognizing the need to keep some consistency, we would work with virtual teachers to ensure our in-person students also had opportunities to see their previous teacher should that inevitably change. Second, you will hear specifics around the use of shared materials in classrooms. In early childhood, students engage and interact with the natural world as they grow, learn, and develop. While we will make every effort to socially distance students and provide separate manipulatives when appropriate, some items and spaces may be shared. Shared materials within the classroom will be cleaned and disinfected frequently. High-touch surfaces such as dramatic play materials, blocks, cots, and other items will be disinfected each night and ready for student use the following day. I am working collaboratively with PK2 building principals and Mr. Terry O'Neill to ensure proper cleaning of materials, surfaces, and supplies in between classrooms where different groups of students attend for morning and afternoon sessions. In addition, early education teachers will follow licensing guidelines and frequently wipe down all surfaces throughout the day using what is known as the 3-step process. Soapy water first, a disinfectant solution second, followed by spraying with and wiping down with plain water. Finally, it is important to note while visitors will be limited in our building, there are some instances that will require in-person interactions with parents. Developmental screenings, diagnostic testing, and early childhood special education therapy services will be provided to students in need at both welcome centers. In addition, enrollment for our Head Start program will take place at both. All safety procedures and guidelines will be followed. Visitors will be limited to 1 parent and 1 child when coming to receive services. Appointments will be made in advance and all parents will be required to complete a COVID-19 health screener prior to coming to the building. Parents, students, and staff will wear a mask at all times. Plexiglass will be utilized to provide a safety barrier between the teacher and student when administering a screening, during diagnostic testing, and therapy sessions. Over the next few days and weeks, I will continue to meet with the Parents and Teachers Coordinator, Early Childhood Special Education Assistant Director, PK2 building principals, early education teachers, and staff to have collaborative discussions and give feedback that will allow for the safe return of our youngest learners. I will now turn it over to Dr. Deanna Gibson, Assistant Superintendent for Area 1.
Thank you, Shantiana. Good evening, Board of Education. It is very good to see all of you in person. Donna, I must say, I felt your smile through your mask. And I'm going to say, I cannot wait for kids to come back to school to get that warm, fuzzy feeling of a smile. Like I'm in my seat, like that felt really good. So tonight, I'm going to share a little bit of information around the primary and intermediate schools. Parents are going to be offered two different options, of course, through the declaration process, a virtual or an in-person learning option. It's important to note that all teachers will be providing concurrent instruction in their classrooms for both virtual and in-person students. As mentioned earlier, March 1st is the proposed return date for our pre-K through 5th grade students whose parents declare in-person learning. The in-person learning instruction will occur Monday through Thursday, and we will continue to remain asynchronous on Fridays. During the in-person instruction, students will remain at their desk or their tables, and they will use their Chromebooks and any necessary materials to access learning. Teachers will utilize Zoom to deliver the instruction, and students will have access to their Chromebooks. As discussed earlier, mitigating strategies will be in place, and we can't say enough, masks will be mandatory. Virtual instruction will be delivered the same way that students have experienced so far this year. Monday through Thursday is going to be synchronous, and Fridays will remain asynchronous. During virtual instruction, students will access instruction via the Zoom that teachers will continue, and via Zoom, and then teachers will continue to use Canvas, our learning platform, our learning management platform, and other resources that have been utilized during the virtual learning experience. It is important to note out and inform parents that our start and end times for the instructional day will need to be adjusted for both in-person and virtual learning. The adjustments are required to accommodate for bus routes. The following daily instructional schedules were used last year during the 19-20 school year. The times are as follows: pre-K through 2, 9:20 to 4:10. Grades 3 through 5 will be 8:50 to 3:40. As we know, social emotional support will be a priority as we re-enter. Addressing the social emotional needs of students remains an important aspect, and we recognize students will not be ready to engage in formal learning until they feel safe. In just a moment, Mr. Gonald, the principal at Walnut Grove Primary, is going to outline what supports will be provided at the building level to encourage and support the social and emotional well-being of our students. School preparation. The district understands that teachers will need time to prepare their classrooms prior to re-entry. A plan will be developed for teachers to prepare their classrooms prior to re-entry. Of course, principals have been working diligently preparing the re-entry handbooks that outline detailed safety precautions, routines, procedures, and supports to safely re-enter for our students. The handbooks will be shared along with the declaration so that parents can make an informed decision. And then again, as mentioned, in just a few moments, Mr. Gonald, he is going to highlight some of those specific details included in the handbooks. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bland, the Assistant Superintendent of School Leadership, and she's going to share secondary information.
Thank you, Dr. Kitson. Good evening, Board of Education, Madam President, Paulette Garman. Ferguson Florissant School District secondary schools, 6th through 12th grades, will offer parents two options through the parent declaration process: a full virtual option or an in-person option. The full virtual option will function as we currently deliver instruction. The in-person option will be in-person learning Monday through Thursday, with Friday remaining asynchronous. Mitigation strategies such as wearing masks will be in place in all buildings. Preparing classrooms and ensuring school safety routines and procedures are in place and is a priority. A reentry handbook outlining best practices for schools to use is prepared and shared with schools. Buildings will be available for teachers to prepare for the transition back to school. Instruction will occur concurrently. Each student will be engaged in quality instruction and meaningful interaction with content. The learning management system Canvas is a critical component for instructional delivery and will be utilized daily. The instructional block includes time for core instruction and allotted time for intervention and enrichment each day. The high school schedule is 8:05 until 3:10 p.m. and high school will have 4 blocks of 85 minutes each. The middle school schedule will be 7:25 until 2:30 p.m. and middle school will have 5 blocks at 68 minutes each. Advisory in all schools will be 30 minutes daily. Lunch shifts will be 30 minutes and the number of lunch shifts will vary depending upon the in-person enrollment. Secondary schools will provide re-entry sessions for staff and students in order to ensure a clear understanding of in-person expectations for teaching and learning. This will also provide students, teachers, and staff opportunities to build trusting relationships as they work through the transition back to school. Expectations will also be continuously taught, practiced, and reinforced during building-based re-entry activities. We also recognize this will be the first time cohorts of students will experience in-person school at their new school assignments. More specifically, 6th grade at the 6th grade center, 7th grade at middle school, and 9th grade at our high schools. With that being said, schools will plan onboarding for each cohort in order to assist scholars to their entirely new school experience. Principals will also lead parent sessions in person and virtually in order to answer any questions and address needs of the community. As we re-enter school, we will create an intentional focus on social emotional needs for our students. Each school will utilize their comprehensive integrated plan in order to support all of our students. We also recognize that our teachers will need continuous mental health and well-being support. We also know that school staff often places other needs ahead of their own. With that being said, school leaders will monitor and support teachers' transition to an in-person instruction. Each building's teacher teams, such as ILT, OLT, and CELT, will be utilized in order to collaborate and create a safe and positive experience for everyone. Employee assistance programs is also available for our staff. Thank you, and I will now hand it over to Rich Miller, Director of Technology. He will share information related to technology and access.
Thank you, Dr. Bland. Good evening, everyone. Technology Services is prepared for instruction to occur both on campus and through distance learning. Teachers and students have mobile technology with laptops for teachers and Chromebooks for students, which will function on or off campus. The district has existing technology in classrooms and networking in schools. Distance learners will continue instruction with Zoom as they have the rest of the year. We have a baseline of internet usage at the district from last year to compare with the needs for this extraordinary circumstance. There is sufficient internet bandwidth or speed to support that baseline with the addition of teachers on Zoom sessions during class. Zoom uses constant audio and video in a timing-sensitive fashion that places high demand on the internet, as many have experienced at home. Students on campus will be in the presence of the teacher, have access to the technology in the classroom, have their Chromebook with internet, and the ability to use all online resources and assignments. The limitation is that there is not enough bandwidth for those students on campus to be on Zoom simultaneously. As part of an existing long-term plan, the district is in the process of doubling the available internet speed during the next school year. To provide the best experience possible for the balance of this school year, the district has arranged to increase internet speed by 10%. That's the maximum possible before these long-term changes take effect. I'd like to introduce the Deputy Superintendent of Operational Services, Mr. Larry LaRue.
Good evening. The Administration Center Handbook is designed to help staff members prepare their work or return to work at the Administration Center by seeking to be consistent with the model handbooks that will be discussed tonight. Information on contacts, building hours, health and safety information, and building readiness are included. An important aspect of these handbooks is the primary recognition on accurate and ongoing communication as circumstances evolve. Please note that department meetings, Zoom meetings, and email communications with staff may be used to discuss information included in this handbook and as updates to it occur. Now, Leo Ganal, Principal of Walnut Grove, will present.
Thank you, Mr. LaRue. Good evening, Board of Education and Ferguson Florissant family. I'm Leo Ganal, Principal at Walnut Grove Primary School. At Walnut Grove, we support students in pre-kindergarten through second grade. We, the elementary Ferguson Florissant principals, have worked collaboratively with different departments in our district to create reentry handbooks to support our community with reentry process at school. At this time, I'm going to share some items that are included in Walnut Grove's reentry handbook. I'd like to begin with the students' return to instruction. Students are going to return either in person or remain virtual. In-person instruction will be delivered by a teacher in the classroom to support students present in the classroom and to the students assigned to their classroom at home virtually. The teacher will teach from their desk using the technology and materials necessary for instruction, while the in-person students will remain at their desk tables with their Chromebooks and necessary materials. In-person students will continue to access Canvas and Seesaw. Everyone will maintain a minimum of 3 feet distance between each other and their desk and tables. Virtual instruction will be delivered the same way that students have experienced so far this year. Teachers and students will access Canvas, Zoom, and Seesaw, and other resources that have been utilized during the virtual learning experience. Prior to welcoming back students in person, our school will hold informative sessions for students around health and safety practices. Key topics will include mask, physical distancing, hand washing and hand sanitizing, bringing water bottles to school, walking through the halls, breakfast and lunch, and the bathroom procedures. At Walnut Grove, a pre-kindergarten through second grade school, the instructional day will start at 9:20 a.m. and end at 4:10 p.m. In regards to campus visitors, Walnut Grove's campus will be closed to all visitors without a prior appointment and completion of a health assurance screener. Parents or guardians visiting campus for any reason other than arrival and dismissal must follow the procedures of prior scheduling an appointment and completing the screener. It is imperative that Walnut Grove and Ferguson Florissant School District have the most updated contact information for parents and guardians. Arrival and dismissal. Walnut Grove will be following a very specific plan for arrival and dismissal. We will be using specific exterior doors for specific groups to limit student crowding at any one entry. During dismissal, we will stagger dismissal times for car riders, bus riders, daycare riders, and walkers. On the next slide, you will see a visual that supports Walnut Grove's car rider arrival and dismissal routine. Arrival. Car riders will enter through the back of the school using the entrances from Wadsworth and Florissant Road, which is on the left side of your screen up there, or Elizabeth and Millbank. When you pull up behind school for arrival, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade students will enter through door number 6, which is highlighted on the right-hand side, well, the left-hand side of that map. And pre-K will enter through door number 9, which is the second highlighted spot. Dismissal, all car riders will exit through door number 9, which is on the dismissal map on the right. All bus riders, daycare riders, and walkers will enter and exit through door number 1, the front of the school, where bus, daycare, and students are dropped off. As mentioned earlier by Mrs. Brown, daily screening of students by caregivers is required every day for in-person learners prior to coming to school. Families will use the morning routine checklist. Mrs. Brown also shared the health room guidelines for teachers, which will be used to support staff with the processes and procedures for students to the nurse. If symptoms develop at school, nurses and clinic aides have been trained on the procedures that should be followed if a student or staff should become ill while at school. In addition to our regular health or nurse's office, our building has a designated isolation room where individuals who may be experiencing COVID-19 symptoms may rest while waiting to be picked up. At Walnut Grove, this is classroom number 60 near our stage gym area. In regards to PPE, masks will be worn at all times. If a student or staff forgets their mask or does not have a mask, a disposable mask will be provided as needed. Masks will be available in classrooms, at the main office, and in the nurse's office. Hand sanitizing station stands are in every classroom, and there are many more attached sanitizer dispensers in the hallways. At Walnut Grove, students will move through the hallways by walking on the right side and maintaining 3 to 6 feet distance between students and staff. During recess, masks will be worn. To facilitate distancing, recess periods will be staggered throughout the day. Equipment that can be used individually will still be permitted, for example, jump ropes or hula hoops. Students will be allowed to play on specified playground structures and will be required to wash their hands prior to and after recess. Our classrooms are set up with either desks or tables. Some of the pictures you saw earlier during Ms. Madruzic's presentation were Walnut Grove classrooms. We have arranged the desk and or tables to have 3 to 6 feet between them. Tables will have students sitting across from each other, not next to each other. The specific spots at desk and or tables will be identified and chairs will be placed where students can sit. At Walnut Grove, breakfast will be served in the classroom. Any student arriving to their classroom before 9:20 a.m. will have access to a breakfast bag in their room. Arrangements will be made if Ferguson-Florissant School District transportation is delayed and students arrive after 9:20 a.m. At Walnut Grove, lunch will be served in the classroom. A lunch schedule has been created to ensure supervision. We will also teach routines for eating to students. An example is opening the wrappers of the items, the drinks, and silverware before removing masks and beginning to eat. The instructional schedule will be shared with students and families by the classroom teacher. A special area content schedule, which includes art, music, PE, and library, will be developed and shared with the students and families as well. At Walnut Grove, the students will travel to the special content area classrooms. Addressing the social and emotional needs of students remains an important aspect of Walnut Grove, and we recognize students will not be ready to engage in formal learning until they feel physically and psychologically safe. Here are some of the resources we plan to implement. Collaboration between the CI3T core team, counselors, administration, and teachers. In pre-kindergarten through 5th grade rooms, teachers will deliver second step community rebuilding lessons and morning meeting activities. In pre-K through 12 rooms, teachers will facilitate community building circles. Our school counselors will deliver lessons to students about exploring and handling feelings, provide individual and small group counseling, and make referrals to outside agencies as needed. School social workers are available to assist our families as students transition back to school. A behavior specialist is available to support students transition back to school at Walnut Grove. And St. Louis Children's Service brings specialized services and programs to our schools through our partner agencies. And they are ready to support our students with mentoring and counseling. A few of these specialized services are provided by Behavioral Health Response, Chad's Coalition, Compass Health, and Great Circle. You can learn more specifics on our district website. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Harris, principal at Cross Keys Middle.
Good evening. I'm greeting from the Cross Keys Middle School family, the Board of Education, and our Ferguson-Florissant family. My name is Eric Harris, and I'm the instructional leader at Cross Keys. With the collaboration of many departments of the Ferguson-Florissant School District, we have created this reentry handbook important to support the reentry into our schools. We just finished hearing from Walnut Grove, and Cross Keys is very similar as we are one district united. However, middle schools have some subtle but inherent differences. Our table of contents is alphabetized and linked for easy use. Parents have the option of reading the whole handbook or clicking on pertinent information for themselves. I will highlight specific areas, but not all, including schedules, routines and procedures, and student supports. There are 742 scholars at Cross Keys Middle School, 57 staff who teach students, 33 staff members who support teachers and students. Included in that are my 2 administrators, James LaRue, Dr. Miko Vine, counseling team, and myself. Masks are required to be worn at all times, except when students are actively eating or drinking. The building design will allow students to transition seamlessly by grade level. Students will not be able to cluster in common spaces, restrooms, or halls. We will be enforcing continuous movement through the classroom. Seating charts will be developed for all spaces, shared with appropriate staff for contact tracing. All right. School begins at 7:25, ends at 2:30 p.m. Doors open at 7:15 to allow students to have breakfast. Bus riders enter at door 29, where it will be staffed by administration on the south side of the building. We have 3 entry points into the building. Walkers and car riders enter through door 21 off the basketball court, and it will also be staffed by administrators. Essential skills and SSD transported students enter through door 1 in the front circle of the building. Dismissal. Now, we will speak about dismissal. School ends at 2:30 with a staggered dismissal. Students will dismiss from doors 27, 28, and 29 for bus riders, and door 21 for walkers and car riders. Breakfast. Breakfast begins at 7:15 in the classroom. Students are expected to report to their first hour class upon entering the building. Lunch. All lunches will be the same. No student purchases nor outside deliveries will be permitted in order to maintain a safe environment for students and staff. Lunch locations and time will be determined by location of 4th period class. Example, blue and yellow hallway go together, orange and green go together, purple and red go together. Students are expected to come in, have a seat, and wait to be called to get their lunches. Students may enjoy the outside space if weather permits. Scheduling. You are now seeing Cross Keys schedule. It is a 5-block schedule with class periods of approximately 68 minutes. Transitions are 4 minutes. Teachers and staff will monitor class transitions and continuously remind students to properly wear masks. Social-emotional needs. Providing support to our students is a priority. We will utilize our CI3T plan to provide tiered supports to students. CI3T is the umbrella in which our social-emotional services are housed. Some of the social-emotional supports for students are care teams, PBIS, and 7 mindsets. Care teams consist of stakeholders that come together to develop an individual care plan for a student, be it academic or behavior. PBIS, positive behavior interventions and support. We have also implemented an online component used to acknowledge and encourage appropriate behaviors based on our schools' universals. Advisory. We use advisory to connect students to an advocate that supports academic and social needs while supporting relationship building amongst their peers. School counselors and social workers collaborate and communicate to support students and families' social, emotional, and physical needs. We have a student engagement specialist. They work with students, families, and staff to identify and support students in need of special care, i.e. restorative justice and handle with care and trauma informed. And our partner agencies, CKMS, will be available to continue our relationships with our outside agencies that can support our students. Example, Great Circle. Our administrative team will also continue to do home visits as needed. Other items, lockers will not be assigned to improve the flow of traffic as well as limiting ability to cluster. Restrooms will be monitored by staff to ensure proper social distancing and to prevent clustering. A supply list is located within our handbook. Example, charge Chromebook, clear backpacks, and water bottles. Instruction will occur concurrently in person and virtual students receiving instruction at the same time. Students should dress for physical education at home, as they will not be allowed to use the locker rooms to change clothing or shoes. Students should also be prepared to participate in outdoor classes by wearing proper outdoor attire, jackets, sweatshirts, long sleeves, sweatpants. And the last piece, parent engagement. We will host virtual and in-person sessions in order to provide families an opportunity to visit their child's school and learn more about the reentry process. With that, that concludes our presentation for Cross Keys. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Frank Williams, Principal of McClure North High School.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, and good evening, Ferguson Florissant School District Board of Education, and to any other stakeholders in the community that can hear my voice. I am Frank Williams, and I'm principal of McClure North High School. At McClure North, we have worked collaboratively with different leaders in our district and leaders in our school to create a reentry handbook to support the community with the reentry process at McClure North. By the end of this presentation, it's my goal that students, parents, and teachers are confident with the work being done to prepare McClure North High School for reentry. To ensure that teachers' voice is heard, members of McClure North's ILT, CELT, and OLT have had the opportunity to read the handbook, offer suggestions, question various procedures. It is also my plan to hold parent meetings to get input from, the community. This handbook is a living document and will continue to be fine-tuned using the great minds of McClure North staff members and the Ferguson Florissant community. At this time, I'm going to cover specific procedures exclusive to McClure North reentry process, such as arrival, attendance, classroom expectations, dismissal procedures, lunch, and breakfast schedule. The school day at McClure North is from 8:05 a.m. to 3:10 p.m. Students may enter the building at 7:45 a.m. Students should not plan to arrive or be dropped off prior to 7:45 a.m. Students who drive their own vehicle or are dropped off will enter the building on the north side of the campus through door 1, it's often referred to as the Waterford side. Students who arrive on the school bus will enter the south side of the campus through door 17, commonly known as the St. Catherine side. If a student is arriving late to school, upon entering the building, the student will report to the attendance office and speak with the attendance office professional, Ms. Naomi Anderson. Ms. Anderson will administer late slips for students arriving after 8:20 a.m. Students arriving after this time must have a late slip to enter class. Ms. Anderson will also ask for documentation stating the need for an attendance change, whether it's leaving early or a parent phone call or a doctor's note. Students will be dismissed through a staggered dismissal schedule to prevent congestion at common exits in the building. Students will be expected to remain in their classroom until they are dismissed. Students who are carpooling will be dismissed at separate times. Those students should make plans to meet at the driver's car. If there is a reason that your student would need to leave early, please contact the attendance office to notify Ms. Anderson. She will modify the attendance as needed and notify the teacher of the student of the early dismissal. Although student attendance is always important for academic success, we know that during these times, our families will be extra cautious sending their child to school when they are exhibiting symptoms that could be contagious. We appreciate your efforts to screen your child daily for symptoms and keep them home if there are any concerns. Please Continue to call in any absence and provide information that would be important to the overall health of our school. If your child will be staying home due to illness, please follow the bullets you see on the screen. Upon arrival, students will have the opportunity to eat grab-and-go breakfast. Students may eat in the cafeteria concourse, the upper advisory, or the lower advisory. To ensure social distancing, only one student is allowed to sit at a table. Custodial and cafeteria staff will clean tables with disinfectant once a student finishes their breakfast. Preliminary plans are for students to go to their first block class when they finish breakfast. I will meet with the organizational leadership team to develop a plan for supervision. At the conclusion of breakfast, the custodial staff will clean and disinfect the cafeteria. McClure North will offer 3 lunch times. First lunch is going to be from 11:05 a.m. to 11:35, second lunch from 11:50 to 12:20, and third lunch from 12:35 to 1:50. Students who have the third block class on the first floor in the terrace, or if they are a North Tech afternoon student, they will eat first lunch. Students who have third block on the second floor will eat during the second lunch, and those students who have third block or PE classes will eat during the third lunch. Cafeteria staff will serve students grab-and-go lunch at 3 different locations in the cafeteria, in the concourse, and in the cafeteria and in the concourse to ensure social distancing. The floors have been marked to provide students visual aids of where to stand and where they can wait for their grab-and-go lunch. The athletic department at Ferguson-Florence School District continues to balance the importance of physical activity and athletics for students with the reality of COVID-19 in the country. The district has developed a return-to-play plan that has been approved by the St. Louis County Health Department. The guidelines were developed to limit the transmission of COVID-19 as students engage in sporting activities and continue receiving quality instruction. We have partnered with the St. Louis County Health Department and the Missouri High School Activities and Athletics Association to outline best practices for our students who engage in athletics and activities. And currently, you see pictures of our first game there, and we are currently at Clayton today. So thank you to the Board of Education for allowing that to be. Students are expected to adhere to the Ferguson-Florence School District Student Expectation Code. So when it comes to instruction, we will still hold kids accountable via the Student Expectation Code. Students and staff must wear masks at all times. Students will engage in quality instruction while receiving in-person or virtual instruction. Concurrent teaching will occur daily. This model of instruction is 1 lesson to 2 audiences. Some students are in person and others are remote. McClure North teachers will maximize learning regardless of the student's modality. Students are required to maintain social distance in the classroom. Students must sit in seats assigned by the teacher. No mingling or clustering with classmates before or after class. Teachers will work to limit unnecessary movement during class. In-person students are expected to attend class in person, and virtual students are expected to attend class virtually. If absent, virtual or in person, students will need to contact the teacher regarding missed instruction and assignments. Monday through Thursday, students receive instruction in person. On Friday, students complete asynchronous instruction. They do not attend school. Students will be able to access their schedules from the Tyler portal. A great deal of time and thought has gone into the process of student placement for the 2020-2021 school year. Courses are created based on student needs and interests and are balanced. Our class lists are structured to provide equitable class sizes at each level. Moving students is difficult without causing imbalance and inequalities. Therefore, we will strongly encourage students to maintain the schedule that they already have. To ensure we can support students in classes that may cause challenges, we will continue to allow intervention times within every block and work with teachers on how to maximize the use of the intervention safety net. Virtual students are expected to join class at the beginning of each hour and remain engaged until the end of class. Student support time is an opportunity for students to seek additional help from their teachers. Students can seek additional academic, behavioral, and social emotional support. There are multiple opportunities for students to connect with staff. Advisory has been moved to later in the day per student survey data. This will allow students to receive support for the classes that they had earlier in the day. Many students have expressed wanting to receive support for classes that they already have had for the day. My goal was to give confidence to our Board of Education, our community, and our teachers that we are diligently working to prepare a safe environment for our teachers and students. I reiterate, the McClure North Reentry Document is a living document that will continue to receive input from the various leadership teams at McClure North and within the district. Now I'd like to welcome Ms. Sheila Cars.
Yes, so she's gonna be using your side, so once that side gets disinfected, she'll start with it. I just wanted to take this moment to breathe, because I know it's been a lot. And she's the last principal. This is the Innovation School. This is one of our specialty schools, but I wanted to include that. We got an elementary, a middle, and a high school principal. We won't have all the principals, all of them are here ready. If you have questions, and we can answer those, but I wanted to make sure she came on because she's one of our innovation or one of our specialty schools. And after that, Ms. Ann will come and close out and then open it up for questions. So maybe about 10 more minutes, and then we'll be ready for the Q&A and we'll get some of those next time. Thank you.
Greetings, President Dr. Thurman, the Ferguson-Florissant School District Board of Education, Dr. Davis, in this great community. Thank you for allowing me to share Innovation's High School Return to Learn plan. I would like to acknowledge and give thanks to my Innovation staff for their help and collaboration in the development of this reentry plan. A lot of the information in my handbook would be similar to what you have heard this evening, and I will highlight the differences that are germane to Innovation High School and addresses the 4 core areas: health and safety, access, security, and support. You will see these core areas threaded throughout the reentry handbook. Students should not plan to arrive or be dropped off prior to 7:45 a.m. Upon arrival, all students will travel through the breakfast line. We have identified a specific door for entrance into the building, door 9. We delineated where students will exit, so fewer students will be in the same area. Masks are required to enter the building, and students will practice physical distancing. Innovation staff will provide masks to students as needed. Students will be dismissed through a staggered dismissal process to prevent congestion at common exits, starting with student drivers, car riders, and buses will be announced one at a time by office staff. Students will remain in their seat, and they will be reminded to remain in their seat and wear their mask. Here you will see we have deliberate and intentional in our plannings, identifying specific doors for students' entrance and exit during meal times so that we have fewer number of students in common areas. Breakfast and lunch are grab-and-go meals and will be eaten in the classroom. Part of the big picture learning design is to include pick-me-ups as means to establish our larger family community. Pick-me-ups will rotate weekly by advisories. The common areas will be accessible to the hosting advisory for that particular week. Students will not mingle or congregate with classmates. Masks must be worn at all times. Students will have assigned seats. Innovation High School will have an accommodation room during mealtime. The accommodation room is for students or students with high-risk family members due to medical condition. The accommodation room is an extra layer of precaution and will allow additional spacing between students, more than 6 feet of physical distancing. Students will sanitize their assigned areas before and after meals. The schedule reflects the philosophy of the big picture learning design that includes student voice and agency, personalized learning, interest-based learning, and partnering with families and communities. Monday through Thursday, students will receive instruction. Monday and Wednesdays are focused on core curricular concepts. Tuesdays and Thursdays are focused on learning through internship component of the design. Students are involved in a variety of virtual internships, community service projects, or passion projects. Students will continue to receive all services as outlined in his or her IEP, regardless of the parent's declaration of in-person learning or virtual learning. On Fridays, both virtual and in-person students will complete asynchronous learning. Another aspect of the big picture learning design is the learning through internships component. Students will have the opportunity to participate in both virtual and in-person lead to learn experiences. Should students and families decide to pursue an in-person internship, we must have a completed district-approved COVID-19 waiver form and a universal field trip form signed and on file in the office. Additionally, students will complete the organization screener and follow the organization's guidelines and mitigations. Because we know equity can be a factor, identified families will have access to transportation. I am in communication with Kevin Perron, and we are working on the language in terms of internships, transportation, and have identified a radius for internship sites. Hallway movement will be limited whenever possible. During transitions, students will keep socially distanced 6 feet. Teachers will supervise hallway, reminding students of safety measures and expectations. Recommended 2 to 3 students at a time in the restroom during a built-in classroom break time. Example, transitions to students' math or elective classes. If a student needs to leave the classroom, students will utilize a QR code scanning system. Some transitions may include passes to the counselor's office, intervention locations, or in individual restroom needs. 9th grade will use the East Wing restrooms. 10th grade will use the West Wing restrooms. So you see, there was a QR code on the slide there. And if you had a cell phone and just kind of took a picture of that, it will link you to the website. And so this is unique and special as we are utilizing this QR code. It will capture students' name, students' time, so it will be a step time, and location in the event we need to do contact tracing. Addressing the social, emotional needs of students remain an important aspect of Innovation High School. As we re-enter school, we will create an intentional focus on social and emotional skill building, mental and behavioral health, personal safety, and self-regulatory capacity. Establishing a sense of safety and community may take some time, and all staff are prepared to provide support and collaboration with CI3, T committee, our SELP committee, school counselor, social workers, and partnering agencies such as Great Circle. All teachers will continue to implement the 7 Mindset Social Emotional Curriculum. Now I will hand it back to Mr. Hampton to wrap up.
The board, we've shared quite a bit of information this evening, but I'm sure you still have many additional questions. And so at this time, we would love to answer any questions that you might have.
First of all, I want to say thank you. Can we give them a round of applause? much for your presentation. You can tell that you did quite a bit of work, and we do appreciate all of the work and time that went into putting this presentation together. It's very evident that you've really done your work. However, I'm sure that there could be a lot of questions. So at this time, first of all, I do want to say to the board, you want to please take a break. Don't please do that. Or we can take a 10-minute break. How would you rather do it? Take a 10-minute break? Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break at this time. So we will return at 7:45. Is that right? Thank you. No questions.
That we were looking for. And at this time, we would be going through the presenters that presented, and then what will happen is I will ask the board members if they have any questions for that particular presenter, which makes it a lot easier because I see our cleaning crew is hard at work sanitizing each time, and I don't want them to have to double sanitize. So I think that might be the most easiest and effective way. But we will start with Dr. Parker, can you please come to the podium? And so board members, please review your questions. Dr. Parker was the first person to talk from the today. If anyone has any questions directed to Dr. Parker.
Do you prefer curriculum questions, or do you prefer us to defer those to the principals during those presentations? As you oversee curriculum, I don't know which one you prefer to defer to.
Why don't you go ahead and ask now, and then we can bring up as needed.
Okay, so one question is about the co-current model. How would, for example, a physical education class at secondary level do co-current model if they're outside and kids are on Zoom? How would something like that look?
So that's some of the benefit of having talked to other districts who've already been back and what that looks like. There's a couple of different models that go on. And so some of it is if they go outside, either they are in a situation where they switch to a phone and they're outside as well. But if not, then that's an asynchronous time for the virtual students, sorry. Or it's being done at the same time.
Thank you. One last question with that is just about co-current model. How was the decision made for particularly middle school? I certainly understand high school schedules and the amount of classes that high school offers is there's a lot. And so to switch schedules is pretty extreme. So specifically relating to middle school, which is very different than a high school child, was that decision made to do concurrent teaching?
So when we look at the time frame, March 1st at the earliest, and we look at relationships that teachers have already built with families, and we look at what needs to be done to reschedule students. So for the best interest of students is to keep the current schedule. And while we know, Dr. Martin, that concurrent is not your favorite by any means, and we recognize that, that's not a best practice, but there is no best practice right now. And so when we're thinking of pandemic, and again, we looked at Fresno, we've looked at districts across the United States, concurrent, maybe beginning March 1st, knowing we have to have in-person testing, knowing we have spring break that first week of April, that was the best case scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And, board, we will try to keep it to 2 questions that you have to ask, and then somebody else will jump in to ask another 2. And then if I need to come back to you, I definitely will. Did anyone else have anything for Dr. Parker?
Yeah, I do have one. So, and Dr. Parker, you have to let me know if this question isn't for you, it might be for somebody else. During the presentation tonight, and I can tell a lot of work went into that, and I appreciate it. I didn't hear a lot specifically about our students with special education needs and anything in particular that's going to be done to address their needs. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
I could share with you, but I think Dr. Knowles would be a better person to share, so we can get her to come down here, if that would be acceptable.
And while we are getting her, we also have our area coordinators who are here as well. So if we can get her and maybe 1 or 2 of our area coordinators, because we have them aligned to the elementary, secondary schools. And so we've done some extensive work around how we will provide services to students with IEPs as well. So someone was there for us.
And while we're waiting on her, I did have a question, Dr. Parker. Mine is pretty simple, well, at least I hope it is. In regards to the parents' decisions, if they did choose to come in person and maybe things were not what that student expected or it became overwhelming for that student, do they have the opportunity to switch back to virtual?
So I will say when the declaration goes out, the initial answer is no. But that's an initial answer. And I think those situations have to be done on a case by case.
Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering, for parents that elected for in-person learning, will they also be responsible for completing a COVID screening for their child at least daily or weekly, like we were prior to coming?
So the expectation for our families is that they do the screener at home, and we'll use the honor system for that.
I don't know, you can come over here if you like.
Dr. Powell Walker, would you like to repeat your question?
All right, my question, my comment was that when all the presentations were being shared tonight, although they were very informative, I didn't hear a lot about what things we are specifically doing to meet the needs of our students with disabilities. And so the thinking was to have them come in and maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that are being put in place to ensure the learning experience for those students.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Board. Well, the principals and the area coordinators have taken special care of providing plans specific to each building. So in those buildings where we have programs that we will follow the protocols put in place by Ferguson Florissant, but all of our teachers and staff we've ordered PPE for them. We've also taken the time to go through our classrooms and set some parameters in terms of making sure that we can social distance. For those students that receive therapy services, the therapists will continue to provide services. We will make sure that they have shields and masks in place. We will do the best that we can not to introduce too many of our staff into a particular classroom. If a student has services, therapy or such, and they need to be pulled out, staff will go to the door. Teachers and staff in that room will work together to send the student to the therapist that's receiving them. That therapist will then take them to the room that they are assigned to provide therapeutic supports and then bring them back into the classrooms. There are instances where speech and language therapists or other related service providers are doing whole group lessons, and rather than going into the classroom to provide that instruction, they will continue to Zoom from a remote location in the buildings to keep from again, introducing another person into those classrooms. Other than that, we will continue to provide the support that we normally provide when there is in-person teaching and learning going on. And if there's anything specific that you would like to know about, techniques that would be used, I'm open to entertain questions about that.
Okay, I do have a couple of more questions. One, I know that in our population of students who have disabilities, there may be some students with some behaviors that may make it difficult for them to social distance or to even just be compliant. And so I'm wondering, did you all look specifically at individual students and think about maybe certain students who might want to recommend virtual learning for them because that might just be a better option? So that's the first part of that. But the other issue I know that has kind of come up just across the region is the challenge of providing, ensuring that all of the students receiving all of the proper accommodations through virtual learning. That's been a challenge in and of itself. So I'm interested in those two things. Kids who have some more challenging behaviors that make it hard for them to social distance, and then how are we trying to overcome some of those barriers associated with virtual learning for those kids who need to be at home.
Sheila, could we add to that with the discipline, how we're going to discipline on masks, how we're going to make sure they wear them?
We do have some students that have sensory needs. And in those instances, the area coordinator might have to get involved to have conversations with the parents to talk about the mask requirements here in Ferguson, Florida, and to ensure that they will work with us to acclimate the student to wearing a mask daily. That's probably the best that we can do with that, is to front load the families with information.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that. I know that right now what you're kind of speaking in are just kind of like general terms. And I know it's kind of hard to narrow it too much, but what I'm interested in is knowing, based on our student population, individual kids that buildings are already aware of. There's some kids you can think of right away, you know some of this stuff's not going to work for. And are we waiting until those kids arrive in the building, or are we being proactive and saying, we know this child's going to need this kind of support, so we're going to do these things in advance? So that's what I'm wondering, is that planning?
The best answer that I can give you, since we have not been in session, is that our area coordinators are working with students that we know, with teachers that we know, or case managers for students with difficult behaviors, to talk about what will need to be in place when we come back. But because we have no experience with that to this point, we will implement what's in their behavior plans or the accommodations that are there. But first, when we find out if we're coming back or not, we will have a staffing in those buildings to go over those students' plans that have behaviors and talk about what needs to be in place prior to them coming back. There will be no special equipment that will be added as a result of needing to social distance or anything like that. Whatever is in that child's plan, we will implement to the best of our ability. We will make sure that we have staffings to make sure that our GNA counterparts are aware of behaviors and aware of the needs of the students, but it will be trial and error as it relates to managing students' behavior. There are some things that we can put in place proactively, but there are a lot of unknowns.
Dr. Paul Walker, can I jump in and add to that? Some of the other things that we have done, along with Dr. Knowles, of what she just said, is also talking again to other districts that are around us and their area coordinators and their resource teachers about some of those things that may occur and what have they done. But the other thing that I want to be really careful of is all students are entitled to return, right? So just because they may have behaviors, I wouldn't necessarily want them to have to stay out. We will make the accommodations and do whatever it takes to make sure that not only staff, students, but that student.
That was not what I was saying.
Okay.
I'm not encouraging and would never know this is gonna be a struggle for. And so as an IEP team, there might be a decision made that this is not gonna be the best setting for the child. So that's what I'm getting at. So I wanna make sure we clarify that. So I'm not gonna say we exclude anybody, but I think, there are gonna be some circumstances where we have to really think about what's gonna be in the best interest of that child and their learning. And then my final thing is just, you mentioned that there will be some instances where students would maybe taken to a separate room to receive services. And I just want to make sure that we feel confident that all of the schools have these separate spaces that kids can be taken into.
Space, because we've been out of school, in-person school for a year now. Space is something that we will have to address immediately after the decision is made here, because we still need to walk those spaces that are allocated to staff this year to determine what needs to be added to or removed from those areas. That's something that is still being negotiated right now.
All right, thank you. Thank you both.
One of the challenges with that, Dr. Walker, is this declaration. So which students are coming back, which students have the IEPs, and how best to accommodate them. The other thing I wanted to mention back to Dr. Martin, what you had mentioned about concurrent, is we have had multiple conversations with Rockwood. Rockwood has given us absolutely everything that they have, because they have done the simultaneous concurrent the entire time. And so Liz Davenport, along with our coordinators, are already working on how best to support our teachers and give them enough time to make that transition.
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear with my question, just because I was uneasy after the answer. But when I'm in COVID screening, I know like prior to coming to church or prior to coming in here, there were questions that I had to answer to make the building know who's coming in. Will we be implementing anything like that to parents for their child entering these schools before they come into them on a daily or weekly basis?
Got it. So in each of those handbooks, I don't know if you saw that there was a checklist. And so it's a reminder to our community and to families that every morning they are to go through that checklist. And if their child checks any of those boxes, then they remain home.
Let me add to that. The adults will, but we won't collect data on the students, right? Because that came up earlier when we were having these conversations. So parents, we're going to ask them to use the honor system and go through that screening checklist. If the child has any kind of symptoms that could be COVID related, then we absolutely ask them to keep the children at home. But we can't collect the data on them. I also want to just say,
Why, Joe, can't we collect the data?
we won't collect the data on the students because that's healthcare data. So, we had that conversation, I think, before about the data with collecting who has it, because there are a lot of opportunities to compromise a child's information. And with FERPA and HIPAA, we want to make sure that we don't just have data available and it would really put us at risk as a district. So we're asking parents to use that checklist. So it'll be in every handbook at every school. So a simple checklist that the nurses, Diane Brown and the nurses have put together, so that if a child has a cough, it's the same things that we do when we go to church or go to a doctor's office beforehand. And then parents, because we had initially said we were going to do that, but then that question came up. We had our attorneys involved. It really puts us in a precarious situation as a district to collect that data before they get here, and it really can be, there's so many nuances there. So the safe thing to do is to ask parents to do it, and then make decisions about whether or not I should allow my son to come to school or not that day if they're feeling a certain kind of way. And then parents can get the medical attention that they need. The other part that I wanted to just address, and I know Dr. James was going to say something too, and Dr. Powell, you kind of went to what I was going to say, the exclusion part, because once a child, every year we look at, certainly, and you already said it, that you can't exclude, of course, but we have already have had some conversations. And I know some of the high school folks in particular, where we know some students that had some issues in the past, and obviously there are going to be some challenges maybe when they come in. We have to see that when they come in, because we have discipline committee every Wednesday before COVID happened. And so we have the data there. Again, this is a work session, so we'll be tooling this week in preparation for next week, so we can have some more in-depth conversation and come back maybe with some other specifics, right, that I think will be important for the board to hear in terms of SSD, what students, we're doing with students who have IEPs, so that we can give them more support. But that question that you raised is a very important one, and Dr. James is going to say a word or two about some of the universal things we have in place. But we do want to acknowledge that we know there are going to be some super challenges, and where there are, we have to give the parent the opportunity to decide whether I want my child to go back or not. We know there's some issues there. If it happens that there are problems, before we let a child get down a long road of red, we'll put them in virtual, and that way it's safer for them if they present once they if parent chooses to send them back to school.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. So I wanted to highlight a lot of our work that, coupled with Dr. Knowles, that we've been doing in our CI3T core committee, which includes our makers team. So prior to the pandemic, or during the summer months, the planning that Dr. Parker shared, we spent a lot of time identifying routines and procedures for online learning. And so part of our work right now is to begin to examine those routines and procedures that are currently in place in schools as a part of their matrices, and how that will look in the midst of the new guidelines. So who will provide those interventions and supports? What are those new routines that need to be in place? And then how do we support those students who do not respond to some of the supports? And so I kind of jotted down a few notes based on the questions that I heard. So we would examine our pre-COVID routines and then identify those routines and interventions, which would include visual supports for our students with IEPs. So some of our students don't process well, and so the visual supports help them to transition through how instruction will be provided. The other pieces around prompting was a part of a lot of our work with CI3T, and then also modeling what's expected, which is reteaching. So part of this, and Amy is doing some work around this with our trauma work, but is developing relationships. And part of what our approach is to ensure that students have the same teachers. So a lot of our restorative practices work will support us with that, and the use of circles in the classroom. So I think once a decision is made by the board, my makers team and I can go back and identify the professional development that will be needed to support teachers in the classroom with students. And so we do have the data, we do track that monthly, we do have previous data, as Dr. Davis stated, to identify specifically who those students are so that they can get adequate support.
Yes, I just want to make sure that we emphasize this instructional. I'm concerned about the safe environment of our special ed students and our early childhood students in regards to proximity and instructional space. And I know that some of the concerns have been that our special ed teachers are in small spaces with no windows, with not good ventilation, and they're working with students who are still exploring their environment and who may have concerns with behavior. And so I don't want to just say that, I don't want to hear just that, yeah, we're looking at that. I want to make sure that you understand that that is a huge concern for me as a board member, that we have a specific attention is paid to those teachers who are in small classrooms with 2 or 3 students who have special needs, and things like sharing materials like books, crayons, toys. I heard earlier that someone said something about students being able to share their balls and PE equipment and things like that. I think that that's something that we really need to make sure that we go back and we try to look at each one of the programs and each one of the buildings that you are that you pay special attention to that.
Yes, ma'am. And so we're working with Ferguson Florissant on the space, because that's not something that we have control over. We have discussed some of those concerns. We work within the space that is granted to us.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to hear.
Yeah, but let me jump in on this one. A couple things. One is the concerns that you hear therapists, who providing services to students. Often that space is an issue because we didn't have COVID. Everybody's in the building, and so certainly there are a lot of spaces that may not be ideal for some of our therapists and speech language therapists or occupational therapists. We did some moving around of our folks. We put a lot of our therapists at vote so they can have additional spaces. So we made our student services center. My hope is, and this will depend on parent declaration, that when parents declare, I suspect we won't have 100% of our students back in school. Whatever we have, I would think we're planning for about 50%. If it's more, we'll make adjustments. So there will be opportunities for some adjusting of those spaces, one. But two, with COVID and proximity, I mean, it's even with the quarantining, and I'm sure they'll come up when Diane is talking about the quarantining questions that may come. That's 6 feet, 15 minutes, et cetera. And Terry mentioned earlier about plexiglass or other ways to mitigate an environment so teachers and therapists aren't at risk. We would have to limit the numbers of people, and we can work with Dr. Null on who the people are, who the students are, and the teachers are, so we have fewer numbers. I can't tell you, and I know some teachers and therapists are listening, that it won't be 100% ideal, but we can limit and have maybe 2 people in a space and provide some additional mitigation efforts. Terry mentioned that earlier. We put, like what you have between you right now, we can build spaces so that it's safer. I did a personal walkthrough at Francis Howell last week with the superintendent there, and I saw places where teachers who had some other sort of underlying conditions, but still were physically in the building and teaching in person, but they had built some things specifically for that teacher who may have that need. So we'll look at those specific cases, because that's the best way to answer it. And then when a therapist has another additional need, we'll get Terry involved, O'Neill and Dr. Knowles and whomever that we can create. We have to create a space. And again, what you often hear is under a stairwell, because I hear it, and teachers send me emails, and I thank you for sending them, because I read them. I don't always have the best answer for them, but I can tell you that we'll work hard to try to figure out the best scenario for our teachers. But again, my hope is that, well, not my hope, but I don't suspect we'll have 100% of our students in back end. So then we'll have an opportunity for some more spaces.
And that will be worked out prior to March 1st if we go back.
So what we'll do, and this is for the team, again, this is a work session. So I'm glad that we're having this work session, because it's going to be important for next week, is that we need to look at those cases by school. So the area coordinators, along with the principals, can specifically look at the cases at the schools where we know. So it's not like you have 100 at every school. You will have a few cases, or however many you have. I think it's going to be really important for area coordinators, along with principals, to look at where those cases are. Let's go ahead and identify those cases now. And I made some notes here about our special education population. So we're addressing those so that we can maybe have a scenario or two we can provide an example of what it can look like. In fact, I think what might be a good idea to you is we can, if we know of a particular case, let's go ahead and, hypothetically speaking, if Joe has a need for some speech language, therapy, and then, Dr. Kitson is the therapist, or Mr. Beals, and so he's going to bring me in. The space is a smaller space. Let's go ahead and create a scenario as to what that looks like. We can take some pictures of it so we can bring it here and show you what an example could be. Again, there could be some other examples based on those needs, but it's got to be based on, as you said before, the case of the student, what their need is.
Well, can I add a couple things to your list? Joe, do you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
One, I didn't get enough information, and Donna brought it up too. I didn't feel I had enough information on the new students, the little ones coming in, or those from other schools that have disabilities. So I'd like to understand more of what you're going to do with K through 2nd grade. I also didn't feel I got an answer on what we're doing with discipline and the masks. I think we just kind of glossed over that. And I don't want discipline, but we've got to make sure they know they need their mask. And I think Terry said this, but I'm not sure. But somebody said students had to bring water to school themselves during the day. And we can't even afford lunch, and we're charging them or having them bring their own water. And I think that we could afford to take care of that. And then the COVID screening, I think you made a comment that, they could sign off on not getting the COVID mornings, having us do the morning screening. And I think if they're virtual, if they're come into the classroom, we need to have them sign a pre-COVID form saying that every day we can take their temperature, because the parents aren't going to take it. They may already be gone before they even get to school. And it's a real safety hazard not to have those students tested. That's all I've got.
I just wanted to say something.
No, ma'am.
It's a work session, you guys.
I'll be really brief. I just wanted to say, you mentioned something about creating spaces, when you realize that there are special circumstances. And so in keeping with thinking about teachers, as you're planning that out, my request would be thinking about, do they have to come back to work until that space is ready? Right, because I can envision a scenario where we're gonna get around to it and we have good intentions, but we have a person in an unsafe situation for a while. Thank you, Dr. Grace.
And it's possible, guys, it's 8:17 now, and we have at least 15 other people that will have to come up to answer questions. We can't keep answers to at least 2 to 3 minutes, please, so we can make sure that everyone gets their answer asked and questions answered. Hold on, Dr. Martin. Can you address at least some of the parts of Mrs. Hogshead's questions that present to these presenters? And then when we have the other questions that she asked, when those presenters come back up, then we will not forget Leslie and ask those questions as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So, spot on with, the scenario around the teachers and so March 1st, March 15th are the recommendations we have for the board in terms of elementary coming back and secondary. So we'll have some time between for teachers to be able to prepare to come back. So we'll look at cases to see where there are opportunities to create spaces for teachers. When it's time for teachers to come in, we need teachers to be available, because what I can probably tell you is that we'll miss something. And if we do, we'll hop on, those particular situations where we know. But again, team, I want us to go through, especially our ACs and our principals, go through, your caseload so we can see where there are opportunities for us to go and be proactive. And then if we miss something, we can accommodate there. Just really quickly, discipline around masks. Masks are going to be required, period. Everybody needs to have on a mask, right? Like that is, we've heard the health professionals tell us that masks are probably more safe than the vaccine itself because they keep the respiratory disease. If we have an issue where we have students who are having some issues there, then virtual may be the opportunity, right? So that way we won't miss anybody getting their education. The water bottle that Leslie mentioned earlier, so I think Dr. Carrs may have said this when she was speaking, that students will be encouraged to have water bottles. They don't have to, it's totally up to them. We have plenty of food and water and everything they need at schools. So that won't be an issue. They don't have to bring their water. It's just that if they want to bring a water, the water fountain won't be available, right? Because that's a hazard. So if they think that water is something they're gonna need a lot of, they can bring their water bottles, and so forth. When it comes to the COVID screening, I know you mentioned that again, Leslie, and I want to say again that, again, we can get Lisa stuff and our legal team involved, but we've been, we want to veer away from the schools doing those screenings for a couple of reasons. One, it puts us at risk, but two, there's no way in the world we can do all that screening each day. It's going to be virtually impossible when you're talking about 10,000 students coming in or 5,000 students coming in. We have to depend on parents to help us with that part. We spent a lot of time talking about that. And I know, Leslie, that is a sort of a place that is one that you care a lot about. That's why we put that particular screener in that Diane presented earlier. That screener can help us. Parents know, they want to, that's why we're having this conversation, because 40% of our parents have said, I want the option to come back. So yes, so I'll stop there.
All right, Dr. Martin, finish us off with this one, and then we will move to the next presenter.
Thank you. This is for Dr. Parker. So as she's come back to the podium, I do want, before I forget, I do really appreciate all the work that you guys did for this, because it's very well thought out and provides a lot of information. So I also want to recognize that, and also recognize that there is still a fear in community and teachers of coming back in person. I want to honor and recognize that there is that fear out there, that we all know no matter what we do, we can never be 100% safe doing it. We have to do our best to mitigate. We are one of the last remaining districts, to my knowledge, in North County and the state of Missouri to even not offer in-person learning. So certainly I think we need to figure out how to do it safely in North County districts. So I appreciate the effort and want to also recognize that there is a fear among teachers still and community members that is real. So I want to honor that voice. I believe, Dr. Parker, you presented a timeline. If it wasn't you, maybe you can speak. It was not you, but I'm going to ask the question because you might still know it from a previous presentation. Specifically, it talks about the 11th through the 28th PK through 2 teachers preparing classrooms, and then possibly 6 through 12, March 1st through 14th. Are we saying that there would be 2 weeks of no instruction and teachers would have 2 weeks to prepare classrooms? What is kind of the, help me understand what's the classroom prep time that teachers are giving? Because the way I read this is like teachers have 2 weeks of no teaching and then just preparing classrooms. So I just want to be very clear for the community and for us to know what is classroom prep time going to look like, and during those 2 weeks, is teaching and learning still going on for our children? So that's not for you. You can call someone else up, or I can wait to ask the question. Either one in honor of Dr. Brady's other question.
If it's not for you, please do not answer, and we'll wait for the person who it's not for.
Thank you.
I can answer,
Oh,
because we don't have an exact answer. Because what we're looking at is one, so when teachers return, so we have brand new teachers, right, that haven't used a smartboard in their classroom. So we recognize that. We also recognize they haven't toured their own building. So they have to have that time to develop with their ILT and work through some of those logistics. So that being said, we're not asking for 2 weeks for students to be all asynchronous. We can't do that. And so how do we work together with building leadership, with our assistant soups over the area of what's going to work best? And so if we're looking at it every other day, if we're looking at 5 days, those are the conversations that we have been having that are ongoing. So we're prepared to do whichever direction that is, but there will be days that will have to be asynchronous for students as we prepare.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And thank you for your presentation. All right, next we will have Dr. Jadali. Board, any questions?
Hello, Doctor. I believe you gave a list of positivity rates for all our neighboring districts, and we're 8th highest. Are any of the 7 districts higher than us currently in person, or are we in consultation with them if they are?
If I'm understanding correctly.
Are any of the 7 districts that are higher than us, because we're 8?
Correct.
Are they in-person learning? And if they are we consulting with them with some of their practices?
So those districts are Afton, Melville, Lindbergh, Rockwood, Ridner, Valley Park, and Pattonville. I will defer to my colleagues to see if they are in person or not. I don't have that data in front of me right now. If we do not have that information, I'm certain we can.
I could answer that. Hazelwood right now is the only other district that is not in person. In fact, I would talk to Melville administrators today in their central office, and their elementaries are 5-day every day.
Any other additional? Yeah, no, actually, any other, Dr.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question because that was going to be one of my questions, because we started off almost at the top of the list and we have gone down the list. And I thought that that was because because we have not been in school and those others have been in school. And so their infection rates have increased, which concerns me. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is the infection rate for our zip code. We're still in the red. And then the other issue is the ratio and equity of the distribution of vaccines and how that is a problem for our zip codes, for our teachers, as well as our students and our family members. So that is another issue that I have a concern about.
Well, I am
Oh,
absolutely.
and I'm sorry, and also Missouri is languishing at the bottom of the list for vaccines, which creates even more dire picture in terms of vaccines.
Dr. Simon, I'm 100% agreement with you. I mean, all those indicators that I went through, which favor new case rate, transmission rate, positivity rate, and the number of vaccinations. As you just brought it up, that is a correct statement. Currently, only 2% of the residents of the state of Missouri have received both doses of the vaccination. Our numbers, yes, they have dropped, but as throughout the presentation I indicated, unfortunately, none of those transmission rate, positivity rate, or the new case rate are in a safe zone at this time. Your question is, are they dropping? Yes, they have dropped, but have they significantly dropped? The answer is no.
I just had one question, Dr. Jadal. You said that you were going to update the widget, and I was wondering now that if we do decide to bring students in, would we add students and those numbers per school to the widget?
Absolutely. The part of the widget will be comprehensive into showing every school all its number of students that they are in quarantine or they are positive case, as well as the staff member parsed out by each school and district.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we can have that, that was my question. If we could have a copy of that to look at for next week, or maybe just an example of what it would look like. And how would, my question further is, how would the data, you don't have the data answer today necessarily, how is the data being fed into that system? Is it being reported by the schools and contact tracing? Is it being reported by St. Louis County data, or how is it being fed into that system?
Well, when we are talking about students, that would be from student services and nurses, or any indication. This would be fed into our Tyler student information system, that whenever we indicate that there is a child, we have to collect that kind of information so we can be able to report it. When it comes to staff, it gets collected via HR department. Whenever the staff is either in quarantine or in isolation, those information again gets collected. We have some systems in place to break it into anonymously, just presenting our district website. We will only have a number of individuals that they are undergoing these situations.
And just to clarify, we're not collecting that information and entering it into a student's Tyler system because that would be a violation of HIPAA, correct? We're just identifying it elsewhere, because I don't want us identifying and having the whole world know which kid is quarantined or has a positive case, whatnot. Just you said that, I think, raise that question.
I allow Ms. Kesh to respond.
Thank you.
So we are collecting the data after we do contact tracing, and we have a specific area in Tyler that we're putting that in, that will feed in, that is HIPAA. It's under a confidential, it's only for the nurses. Like no administrators, no one else will be able to see it. It is locked down.
All right, we're going back down to the end.
Yeah, with the same thing here. Even though students are said to be at low risk for contracting the virus, they can be carriers to our family and family members, especially grandparents. What's our thinking about that, and how are we contact tracing with that? Or I just want to make sure that we're recognizing that.
I yield to Ms. Brown.
Okay. All right, we will. Anybody else, Dr. Jadal? All right, thank you so much, Dr. Jadal. Next, we will have Ms. Medusa. All right, anybody on this end? Anybody on this end? You are saying. Hey, everybody. Sorry, I have to like the room. Everybody is so quickly. Right. It's like you were saying.
I thought you were American
Amy, okay, Amy, no, yeah, I thought it was Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kevin, Director of Transportation.
So, Laura, then Amy, then Kevin.
My list, I have a list, my list is a little inaccurate, but we just start going with my list, we gonna keep it moving. That's okay. All right, transportation, gonna start on this end first. Yeah, again, I want to say thank you to everybody for all the prep and, it's like everybody, just went in hard on this, and we really, really appreciate you all. And everything you do for our students. Is that working? Okay, all right, I got it. Okay, so one question I had was in regards to, so when the students, I remember you saying that when they load the bus, they'll be told where to sit and, and all of that, but I'm just wondering how that will work with the bus driver in the seat. Who's gonna be, is there gonna be an additional staff person on the bus saying, hey, you sit here, or, because kids normally, they get on the bus, and they kind of wanna, oh, sit over here, but, they just get excited and want to sit by the bus. So I'm just wondering how.
That is something, we do not have monitors on our buses currently.
Okay.
We're gonna label the seats, we have 11 seats on our standard buses, which is our 65 passenger buses. There's 11 seats on one side and 11 on the other. We're gonna place those in numbers above it and then assign them a number to the row and a passenger side and a driver's side. And we're gonna do the best we can, and a lot of that's gonna be indicative as well as how many kids are coming back and how many are riding buses. The seating charts are hard, especially for little guys. They get excited, they've been in school cooped up all day, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We can put some other things, we have put monitors in the buses in the past, and we have some early childhood monitors that are able to ride some of our more difficult buses. That's something we already looked into. You're welcome.
I just have not necessarily a question, but certainly something from experience as we've seen. When I saw the declaration, it said if you want transportation, one thing I would offer is to add if they want just an AM or PM, because there are plenty of parents who want to drop their kids off in the morning, which could allow for some additional social distancing in the morning, but really need that PM drop off. So to separate that out on the declaration, because it could save some additional social distancing in bus routes, which is a suggestion as someone who's lived through some busing. So that's all I want to say. Otherwise, I thought everything was great. Love the video.
Oh, I really enjoyed the video. Take it to this side.
I also enjoyed the video. And again, I want to commend everybody for their presentations. And I did really like the video.
Thank you.
But what I did hear in that video was you guys are going to emphasize that you're using a handrail to get into the bus. I did not hear anything addressed of how that handrail will be cleaned between each station or between each stop.
Between each stop, the drivers, it'll be difficult to do that, to run efficiently. We're gonna do as much as we can. We're gonna have the same type of things like maintenance has, I should say custodial staff has, to keep our buses safe. We have sprays and disinfectants as well. I mean, we're in between stops and routes and stuff like that. We're gonna do the best we can and do it as timely as we can. And a lot of that's gonna dictate on how many kids really are coming back and how many kids are gonna really use the school bus. Yeah, there's hand sanitizer on the bus as well, so we're equipped with all the stuff the tools that we need.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My question is about capacity. And depending on, I know when we get declarations from parents, we get buses that are full. What is your plan for that? And in terms of financial or how will that affect our budget in terms of transportation?
With the students coming back and buses being full, it's going to be it's gonna be very difficult to gauge until we really get going. And I appreciate even the AM, PM type thing. Transportation lives and grows every single day. They'll declare that they don't wanna ride the school bus, but then car breaks down and they'll be on a school bus. So when things like that happen, we will have to constantly be monitoring. You know, and with our tablets, that's going to be a huge indicator, not only with the driver support and the, you know, collaboration between us, the drivers and routers to make this all work is going to be very, very difficult. At the same time, we're prepared to do it. We have the technology that can help as well. So we get a bus one day that has 30 kids on it. The bus across the street has, you know, 15 on it. We can start mixing things up. It's not going to be the easiest thing. A lot of communication with parents, a lot of communication with schools. I believe that with the technology we have in place and the climate of the organization and the collaboration that we have, we'll be able to accomplish that.
All right, I'm gonna take it back down this side one more time.
Something else that came to mind certainly is, what is the bus capacity you're aiming for, the maximum that you allow on a bus?
Ideally, right now, would be one child per seat, which is 22 kids on school bus.
Got it. And then the other thing to think about, just as living through it again, is coming up with a procedure for families who do want to switch. What is kind of the deadline and when the turnaround? Because you could get calls every single day, and you also can't be working in an environment where every single day you're changing bus routes and figuring out bus seats. So certainly some districts have said, you need to know by Wednesday, and it will take 2 weeks to get your bus route. So there's something to put in those handbooks that would be helpful for families. So it's clear that if you want to change to add a bus route, we will work with you, but here's the deadline. So they're not expecting the next day to suddenly be on a bus and interrupt the safety. And because for changing the seats for some kids, as Tiffany's kind of alluding to, they're very territorial over their seat. And if they have a new seat, that could set a whole kid off and be a problem for the whole school day for weeks to come. And so certainly wouldn't want that to be the trigger for the school.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Leslie, do you have anything for transportation?
No, thank you.
All righty, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amy, now it's your turn. And I'll start on this end. Okay.
Hi.
This is a question that you may or may not be able to answer, and it's got you and others. But one of the things that I've been hearing that's happening or under consideration across the country is the possibility of aligning teacher vaccination with return to school. So that conversation is out there, and I just wonder, I know that we don't have any control at this point over how quickly people vaccinated for those that choose to take the vaccination, but is that something that has been talked about at all? Because kind of back to what a couple of other people have said, the fear around coming back is real. And I've heard some people say that they wish that there was a way that they could get the vaccination before actually returning to school.
So I'm going to let Diane speak to that, but we have been in close contact with the St. Louis County Health, trying to make plans. There is currently not a plan for the vaccination at schools, but.
Yeah, we meet weekly as a group of lead nurses on Monday evenings, and the county health department joins us during these meetings. And they still have no information at this point of when they might start opening that up for tier 3, which would include the teachers. And so we really don't have any information. What is very much encouraged is for everyone, like I had mentioned, to go ahead and register when your phase and tier eligible, because some of our employees will fall into the age brackets, maybe chronic condition bracket, and then they can just get it as soon as possible. And those probably would be the teachers who are, I know everyone's probably concerned or thinking about it, but the people with the high risk or age who are eligible are probably thinking about it more. So it's highly encouraged to just register. The email that went out included all of, there was BJC, Mercy, SSM, St. Luke's, and the county health department links. And so I think the wording in the email also encouraged people, you can register at as many of those as you want, but be careful to only accept an appointment at one, because then you'll take away the opportunity for others to get the vaccine. So
everyone in the community, whether they're teachers or community members, parents, are very much encouraged to go register at any of those sites and get signed up. Because when you're eligible, you'll get a call or an email or some communication from that entity to sign you up for the program.
And so we're gonna do 2 for 1. We're just gonna do both of these up, so, both of them up here. So if you guys have any other questions, go ahead. So Terry, well, you were still asking. You wanna go ahead and do
Yeah,
that?
I'm gonna go ahead and get my other one out of the way.
Crack in the whip.
So, a question that I have is, let's say we back, okay, what is the protocol for when, staff members become ill? We have to, because one of the things that's come up is, the difficulty that we have with finding subs and that sort of thing, but I know I heard about what we're doing for students, but I didn't hear much about what's happening with staff. And even though, I just want to say one more quick thing. Courtney gave me the evil eye and made me, so I will leave it there. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm sure there's some planning around it, but I just wanted to hear, oh, I know what it is. I know that counselors are still gonna be doing their counseling. Sounds like some of that's gonna be happening virtually. But then, or the counselor is gonna be able to have some sort of structure like this on their desk so that there's some sort of partition between them and students when they meet with them. And maybe the same for social workers if they have office.
That's a good question.
I know that's something that's been done in some places.
Yes.
I just thought I'd ask.
Yes, that's a good question.
So both of Sheila questions require additional support. So Terry has probably some of that answer, and Dr. Boyd probably has some of that answer, but we're just gonna have you guys sit. And Diane, were you able to answer the question for the staff?
I do want to just say one thing. So some of our teachers are already probably in that tier 2 because of health conditions or whatnot. So we are encouraging teachers to go ahead and register so they can get their appointments. I know that some social workers, because they're in that mental health division, are able to get an appointment as well in this tier rather than waiting. So we are encouraging register.
Or if you have a second job that
Yes.
puts you in the bracket, if you're a first responder as a part-time job or something, you'll get registered.
Yes.
Yeah. They give no indication at this time as if they are going to use schools as a mass distribution anyway. They just don't know yet if that's going to be feasible because of the amount of vaccine that the state of Missouri is getting. It's just very much unknown.
Over your question. Okay. Terry.
I guess you can answer the question that I asked before about students who are carriers, potential carriers, and how we contact trace, and if they're concerned about them taking the virus, there is concern about them taking carrying the virus home to family members.
Okay, so I'll start with the contact tracing part. Our district is one of the partnering school districts with the St. Louis County Health Department. Many area districts are. And they started that so that we could help doing the contact tracing and quarantining, with an official letter that they have shared with us in partnership with the district. So it kind of took a little bit of that work off of them because they were just overloaded. And so they also provided us with a very in-depth manual, and the manual is very specific. It's like a recipe book. And it'll say for elementary level, here are considerations for contact tracing. For secondary, middle schools, here are some considerations. High schools, they even had it for athletics, and it was so specific that it outlined every type of sport you could think of. So actually, I think it was yesterday, I did a training session with our athletic directors, and I went through the sports piece with them so that they're aware as well. And so we will use that to contact trace with our students so that we're making sure that we don't miss anything. But the main recommendation continues to be within 6 feet for 15 minutes. Always wearing masks. If the time constraint is iffy and they're not sure if it's 15 minutes, we might be able to take in other areas of consideration like the masking or the type of symptoms, asymptomatic versus somebody who's actively coughing in the classroom. But for the most part, it's pretty strict in sticking with the 60 and 15-minute recommendation. And then to talk about the students being carriers. So students that are carriers, we often probably will never know if they're positive or not. We will not legally have a way to trace that or track that because unless we are notified that they're positive, we're not testing students. So unless we're notified that they're positive, we might not know that. So I don't know that there's a real easy way to gauge if a student would be a carrier to take it home. It's also pretty difficult to gauge where somebody has been exposed. So for school districts that are the partner school districts, they want us to contact trace primarily within our district. So if we find out that a student is positive, we would trace that student within our building. We wouldn't really move out. We don't have the jurisdiction to move outside of our district and trace like their relatives.
Okay. Second question is, the staff members who travel out of town, will they be asked to quarantine prior to returning to class?
So right now, the CDC recommendation is not advising it at this moment, at least for within the United States. That probably would be more of a human resource question as well, if there's any input. I know that that has also been brought up in our lead nurse meetings. And to my knowledge, most districts are not tracking that in any way. I don't know if your district that you work in is doing anything like that, but.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Well, that's another question that you can ask. Yes.
This has to be real quick, though. I promise you. All right, I do have a question though. So in the presentation, we talked about making sure that students have their immunizations prior to being able to come back. Are we setting up any resources for those families? Because if we make this decision, sometimes it's going to be very hard and difficult for them to get into the doctor's office now to be able to get that immunization. So are we working with anyone to help our families make it?
So we have had many immunization clinic opportunities. Probably the most recent was the participation continued to drop. And so we had BJC out, I would say, maybe 12 times. I didn't bring that information with me, so I can't, I'm speaking off of memory at this time. But we had many opportunities through BJC for vaccination. We had VNA opportunities and they were promoted as well. And we got, a lot of participation, but as the time went on, it decreased. We also did some flu shot vaccines through VNA and Healthy Kids Express as well.
But we don't have any English speakers.
Can you say that again? Oh, okay.
So we have offered opportunities. We certainly can revisit offering additional. Nurses are continuously reaching out. Before the last board meeting that we had, I had them go ahead and enter the numbers in a spreadsheet for me. And on the Monday, and then I said I needed it updated by the Wednesday morning in case you asked. I didn't bring that information with me today. It has dropped. Elementary level is very low, and they're pretty compliant. Of course, middle school and high school are a little bit higher numbers, and that's mostly because of the TDAP and the MC requirements. So we would have some work to do for exclusions, probably we would have to take.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, sorry. So I'm not sure if this is in your arena or not, but are we going to be doing any after or before care for our elementary students?
But she's not a presenter, yeah. Special guest. Good evening. So we have Unleashing Potential and the YMCA have been partners with us in the past. Both of those organizations I've been in contact with, they are willing to provide services, but they are requiring that we have at least 27 students that would be registered in advance of, and they would go through the same process that we do here at school, that they would put a declaration out. Actually, Unleashing Potential has already done that. They have about 7 students in one of their sites and 9 students in the other. But again, they will not hire staff until they have at least 27 families or 27 students who have stated that they will participate, either to be in the morning or in the evening.
Oh, for the YMCA, so that means, so that's not gonna be on site here, that's not gonna be at the schools, that's something that will bus the students to.
So they are, I'm sorry, so they are willing to continue to provide services on campus as long as they have at least 27 students in either before or after care. And I actually have PowerPoint slides for both of those organizations related to their mitigation processes, how they clean, how they ensure that they're safe, and the number of staff that they would have for that as well. But their cap is 27. You're welcome. Any other before and after questions?
Anybody else with?
Yes, I'm not sure if this is to you, but, I heard, I'm not sure if you said it, but teachers will be teaching from their Chromebooks, while students will also be learning from their Chromebooks. I'm trying to get the picture, so teachers aren't going to be moving around in the classroom, in their stationaries, and the students are stationary in their desks. And then the teachers that are teaching in the classroom, the kids in person are not responsible for teaching children virtually as well. Can you clarify? Oh, that was your question. Okay. Well, welcome back.
So some of it, as we are doing it right now, right? So this is concurrent, this is simultaneous. So to your point, we have, teachers don't have Chromebooks, they have the Dell computers now. And so students who are still virtual will be using their Chromebooks to access via Zoom. Students who are in person can use their Chromebooks, but they won't have the need to be on Zoom, right? So that's going to help with our connectivity that you probably heard earlier. So that was the opportunity to clarify that. The other thing is teachers will be moving, but we have some webcams. We are ordering more to allow same kind of thing. See how the building, we can see the whole room, to have that access to. Again, lessons learned. These are things that we have heard from other districts, private schools that have worked best. But I want to reiterate, it's not ideal. We recognize that. We know the challenges are with that. But in the best case scenario, this is going to provide for our students. The other piece is that relationship piece. I can't hit social emotional enough. And these teachers have been incredible and done things with our students. And our students are craving, I think we've spoke about this before, our students are craving those relationships and they're craving to come back. And so how can we make the best out of a situation we know isn't ideal?
All right, I'm gonna put that down this way.
Just a quick question about the vaccines, vaccination requirements and immunization, sorry. Have we used like low vaccines to search and offered on-site places for some of those vaccines or immunization, immunizations? I know it is a struggle to get so I know you can search through low vaccines to identify people who maybe don't know, so for our nurses using that to identify some students, because I would think for that to be the reason why our students cannot return is because they're not in compliance, and maybe they are and just don't have that.
Show me
that.
that.
So the show me back.
Show me that, thank you, I was close.
Yeah, you were.
I'm not a healthcare professional.
You were close.
My goodness, I don't know this program, and I guess I should, but it's
Show me back.
Show me that.
I absolutely know show me backs.
Yes.
Our nurses look them up and show me backs, even prior to calling parents and asking them if they have shot records. So we look them up first, then we reach out to those who need it. Ask them if they've already gotten it, but just not given us documentation. And then if they have not gotten it yet, then we were offering them an opportunity to sign up to our clinics or encouraging them to go to the county health or their own healthcare provider.
Will we be able to offer some on-site or
More like
something in the future, just as we prepare to return, if there's a date you can try and schedule for some of those
Healthy
families?
Kids Express usually is very accommodating. I can reach out to them again.
Just want to remove that barrier if we can.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, for sure,
So thank you.
definitely.
I mean, I think most parents, a lot of parents probably was like, well, they're not coming, so, no, we can go right.
They did, although that is not the state of Missouri's idea of how that should work. And so I still encourage the nurses to keep reaching out. And yes, some parents were very irritated by the continuous reach out, but it's what we were required to do, you know.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions for support services? Support services or?
This is an ongoing problem with parents and kids who sick.
Hmm.
And do we have a specific plan for what we will do when kids are sent to school sick? We can't contact parents. And I know that you're gonna have spaces for the students when they are ill. But that's still a big concern for me, and not just with COVID, but with other illnesses.
Yes.
It's a concern for everyone, for sure. I think that because of the pandemic, everyone's nervous and scared and not wanting to catch it or share it. So I think parents, in meetings that I talk to other lead nurses, parents are really being more on top of keeping their children at home if they're sick. Have you experienced that? Yes, and we are encouraging parents to update their emergency contact information with a contact that is not like a high risk, so that they can pick their child up. I would guess that if somebody is repeatedly sending a sick child to school, then we would have to have additional supports from the principal or, you know, to have additional talks about that. Because for the safety and welfare of the other students and staff, it just can't happen. So.
And we have been sending out communication about please make sure that your emergency contacts are updated. Even to update it with someone who's not in that at-risk category. Part of the declaration, when the announcement goes out, we'll have that in there as well. As a reminder, please update because they'll be right there in their parent portal. Please update your emergency contacts. And if at all possible, somebody that's not at risk, COVID-19 and the risk factors. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to ask, so for our families, for whom English is not their first language, I don't know how large of a population we have in the district. I wonder, what are we doing to make sure that they're properly communicated with and that they understand all that is happening? And then the second thing is, I know we have provider aides that we're saying are still going to support us with students. Are you anticipating that that's going to be virtual? Or are you gonna bring these additional folks into, you know what I'm saying? Because that, that in and of itself, depending on what their protocols are, could be a problem. So I just wondered about that.
Yes, so our providers are itching to get back with the students face to face. So they have their own protocols, but they want to be back in the schools with the kiddos. We did talk with, I think it was actually Parkway. And so the embedded providers are coming back in because we view them just as staff. So mask up and social distance. They also will continue with telephonic telehealth. So they'll do both because we will have students staying in that virtual setting as well as those that are in person. Did that answer? Oh.
Yes, when those declarations go out, we will make accommodations for students that speak another language and the families.
Anyone else? All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Next, we will have Mr. O'Neill. start on this one.
Dr. O'Neill, I think I'm just gonna come to the schools more often because the quality of air is better. And I wanted to reemphasize that, it's not a question, but considering COVID isn't airborne disease, you stated that our schools are 324 and outside is 18,000 something. It's safer for our kids to be in the schools than it is outside. So again, I just gotta emphasize that. So thank you for that research and that.
All right, so Mr. O'Neill, one of the things that, and I love the diagram and everything that shows like the layout of the rooms and stuff, but I am wondering about the ventilation in all of the rooms. In other words, we know that there have been some issues that have come up before about certain rooms not being properly ventilated. And so while I know that ideally what you shared is what we want to see happen, are we sure that each and every building, each and every room in every building where teachers and students will be, has the proper ventilation to make sure that the air can flow in the way that you want it to flow? And then the second thing is, in some of the presentations, I heard people say 6 feet and some people said 3 to 6 feet. So I'm curious as to what that, what does that mean or why is it different for some? So,
Well, I know that CDC has made a recommendation of 3 to 6 foot. However, we in most places are doing our best to 6 foot. And that's why I said when we were measuring classrooms, we were going every other seat. And in our case, if we go every other seat, we're at 6 foot. And that's our goal. So there will be situations where 3 foot may be what we use because that is allowed by the CDC. But our goal is always 6 foot. Yeah, so the ventilation, during this time period, I even got a couple of emails from people already about specific rooms, which we'll look at individually. However, during this time period when no one was in the buildings, we had our HVAC staff who are all certified and licensed, or certified instead of licensed. They don't license them, they certify them, but they're all certified technicians. And they went to our buildings and did as I said in my presentation. They checked every system, they checked ventilation, they checked all these things. I feel fairly confident that we have done that and that our rooms are prepared. So a couple of people sent me emails. We'll check those rooms individually. We'll go ahead and check all the rooms again. We have some time to do that before we get back. But I feel that our schools are in good shape and we're ready to have our children there safe as far as ventilation and airflow is concerned. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand that when all teachers have been teaching or have a place to be behind plexiglass.
No, at this time, the plexiglass will be in only certain areas where I'm looking at more visitor and high traffic areas, like I mentioned, the security desk or security area, the office where the office staff, office professional have to work with parents and other people. We have, and there are some incidents where we have bought some smaller plexiglass things for the lower grades where they're one-on-one or 2 with 1 teacher. However, the thing about plexiglass, we have to remember things have changed over time, kind of like gloves. Remember before we all were to wear gloves, now we're not. Same thing with plexiglass. It was a great idea in the beginning and it helped a lot. Now you still have to wear a mask, still have to social distance, even though you're all doing, you all keep putting your mask on, even though you have a piece of plexiglass between you. So it's not foolproof. So you're still going to wear a mask. It's still best to be at least 3 feet if you can, even when it's plexiglass. In some of our pictures, I know you couldn't see that well because they're smaller, but even the circles we put in the office, we don't put it up against the plexiglass. We have a circle back. So plexiglass here, circle where you stands back here. So even with plexiglass, there still has to be some distancing and there still has to be other measures in place. I know that there have been some schools that have visited, Dr. Davis has visited, and I've talked to some other colleagues of mine, and it's not being used as much in schools because it's not as highly recommended as it once was, just like gloves and some other things.
What about providing a face shield for teachers? And this is more of a comfort for teachers.
And that's exactly it. It's a comfort. It doesn't protect you much more. You still have to wear a mask. The medical professionals wear them, and that's who they're really made for. Kind of like they say the same with the gloves.
Those are really for medical professionals. That's something, we can do all kinds of things, but again, you still have to wear your mask. You still need a social distance. Just because you have a shield on doesn't mean now you can get right up against somebody or not wear your mask. I think a lot of people want to wear plexiglass or a mask or a shield because then they don't have to wear a mask. But that doesn't get you away from having to wear a mask. Because still the best protection we have is mask and hand sanitizer.
But I would also like to ask that we provide face shields for those who like to have those face shields.
And we will be doing that. We have utilized some of our care funds to purchase face masks. They have glasses with a face shield, so each of our teachers will receive one of those.
Wonderful. And also, I really think it's important to make sure that the containers are filled with sanitizer.
Absolutely.
It's nice to have those nice little stations in the classroom, but making sure that they're filled so that you, hopefully you are making sure, I don't know, the custodian, who's responsible for making sure that those are filled.
Absolutely. As I mentioned in the presentation, those will be checked throughout the day when they clean high spots and clean the bathrooms, the high touch areas of the bathrooms. They'll also be checking the hand sanitizer, soap, and making sure those are filled. We bought the particular kind we bought because it has a bag that lasts longer. It lasts longer than these. These are, you have to keep an eye on these where those are longer, and we have a lot, and it's actually economic. It's a much cheaper price than buying a bottle. And so we have a good stock of those, and we have another round already ordered so that when we have free space in the warehouse, and we filled it up with cleaning supplies and other supplies we need. As soon as the space opens up, we already have more ordered. So we will definitely, yeah, you're right. If there's a dispenser and it's empty, it's useless.
I just have one question, Terry. So you mentioned the 94% in the building. Now, is that all buildings that's 94? 98. Is that all buildings or is that average of the buildings?
That's the average of buildings. So what we did is, if you notice in my presentation, I talked about, we did, I think it was something like 68 different sites throughout the district. So it's been almost every building has been tested at one time since 2005. And over that period of time, that's the average. We've had rooms as low as 7. We've had them as high as 1,000. And so the average is at 350. 1,000 is still considered extremely clean and needs no attention whatsoever. And so that's our kind of our range, and the actual range goes up to 1 million. And so, and the outside, again, those were the 13,000 and the 18,000. Those were again averages. And so there was times when the outside air was 45,000 in the county, and in our own area it might have been 60 or 70,000. And so those are again averages.
And for those schools that have the lower averages, are there certain things that we're putting in place to monitor those particular schools to make sure that it doesn't go any below or anything like that?
Yeah, so none of our schools have met the standard to need any attention. However, anytime we get a report or we test, we always immediately clean, and that means getting up in the ceilings, checking ductwork, walls, floors. We use an ionizer, which takes the air and cleans it and puts it back in the room. And we do that every time we get any kind of report or do any kind of testing afterwards, just to be sure.
And then I just have one more question, and I don't know if this is your question or not, or do I need to wait for high school? But are the teachers responsible for cleaning the classrooms once the switch in classroom changes in periods?
Yeah, so we're asking that the students and the teachers, especially in the upper grades, clean the desk when they leave in between, because we don't have enough staff to go into every single room between every single class. So we are asking that they wipe their own desk and that the teachers assist us with that. In the upper grades, we'll have spray and cloths, disposable cloths, and in the lower grades, we'll have wipes.
Thank you. To extend to that question, disposable meaning paper towel or
Yes, correct.
I only have a couple of questions for you. Of course, I would say your field is one that we hear most from teachers and community about. It's just the safety of buildings. And certainly, I know this is something personally that you've been working on since I toured all the buildings almost a year ago with you, and you were preparing for the return back then. So I know it's something you've been working on. Question about restrooms. I noticed here there was no signs on any restrooms that limited the number of people in a restroom, and there was no sinks or urinals or bathroom stalls covered up to limit the number of people. for schools, will they, this is a school, so will they be limiting, have a sign outside the door, so limit how many people should go in the bathrooms, covering up urinals, covering up sinks, so people aren't standing right next to each other?
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to be covering things, but in the presentations by the principals, they stated that there would be, they were only allowed 2 in the bathroom at a time, or whatever their numbers were for different levels. So we weren't going to be doing that. We are putting placements outside of those, stand here stickers outside the restroom. So if there is several people waiting to go, that they'll have that 6-foot distance outside those rooms, as well as the offices.
Sorry, if we could make sure the signs are posted about how many people in the bathrooms, and then certainly I know like the gallery and others have the sticky film to put over the urinals and sinks. I would encourage us to look at that because it's a clear signal of like, don't stand right next to me because it's less than 6 feet, certainly. The next thing is about class size. Have we identified each class size of how many desks can fit in each room specifically as it relates to schedule?
Yeah, so that was one of the things I covered as well in the presentation, that are, again, on average, because we have so many classrooms, I can't tell you every single classroom, but on average, it's 11 to 15 students in a classroom. So we have to start being concerned when we pass that limit per classroom. However, some classrooms obviously are larger than that. And so we are, like I said, if you notice some of the pictures, we're basically doing every other seat. The way our classrooms are set up, that puts them at 6 feet. So that part helps us determine as well, not just the size, but also how the desks are placed and how they can be placed. And so that helps us. So as we're setting up, we're measuring, we're not just going every other seat, we're measuring and going every other seat whenever that's possible. Again, in the presentation, I mentioned, once we get that number from the parent preference, we'll be able to make better decisions about those classrooms.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we have identified with building principals as they're looking at scheduling classrooms, because teachers may have to move rooms to accommodate class sizes, that we have identified what is the maximum number of each classroom in order to keep the best social distance.
I don't know that the principals are aware of that, but we do have that information.
So we will get, I mean, obviously, it's
Absolutely.
time we get there, but just want to make sure that we're doing that, because I know 6 feet is a big thing. And I believe you or someone else talked about seating charts, just making sure it's seating charts and desk numbers so we can contact trace. I see Janet shaking her head yes. Next thing would be about air purifiers. If Congress passes this next round of CARES money, it's my understanding that air purifiers will be part of that money that you could possibly use. Would the district look at possibly getting that for some of those classrooms that the ventilation may not be as average or equal to other parts of the building? And we've heard that some classrooms may not. There's been some concern that we've heard from teachers about certain rooms not being that. So I was just curious if the district is looking into possibly if that CARES money does come through in this next round.
Yeah, I mean, if we feel we really do have that situation, we definitely consider that. I'd have to look at that. I struggle with that because I believe that our schools are in good condition. If we need that, it's possible. My concern with air purifiers, what our system does in 15 minutes takes them up to 3 hours. So they move the air at a much slower rate, clean it at a much slower rate because they're keeping it in the room, cleaning it in the room, and putting it back out. They say to do a normal sized classroom, it can take somewhere from 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on what type of purifier you use.
Certainly appreciate that. My last question I have is, do we have a protocol in place that we can make sure to share with teachers and parents if a person is in a room and is known to be positive, the cleaning procedures that will take place of that room location following the identification of a positive case? So say I come in my office, I'm positive, I find out 2 days later, and what is the cleaning process and protocol, just so teachers and parents are aware of what the protocol is, so they just feel comfortable with that process.
Yeah, we can absolutely share that. We have that in place. We've already used that when we've had, staff that have become ill or have tested positive. We've already taken that process in place and done it. So it's something that we can absolutely share.
And then with that, just making sure we have spaces available for classrooms, because it could be known in the middle of the day that a classroom becomes positive, and if you don't want to move the next class in there, so making sure we have additional available classroom space. If you have to move a class for the rest of the day into another location, certainly want to make sure that is just kind of communicated in the handbook, just so, again, these are questions we're hearing from teachers and community. I want to make sure they have a well-rounded answer to be able to answer those. So thank you.
I do have one more question. I'm not a certified tech, so I can't tell you I'm quite in this role. But to help the teachers feel comfortable returning to the classroom, but their particular classroom or particular school? Could you provide that information to them so that they feel comfortable?
By classroom? By classroom?
Well, I don't, by classroom, by school.
It would be difficult, but I could try something. That'd be difficult to put in place. But I mean, part of the issue I think a lot of people have is temperature. So I'm a good example. I'm a warm-blooded person. I'm very warm in this room right now. I'm sure other people are very comfortable in this room. So if you ask me, I'd say this room's stuffy. I know it's not. And so we run into those issues too. You know, it's a temperature thing, so it feels stuffy when you feel hot. And so there's different things that go on in each room. So if there's specific concerns, and I've gotten a couple of emails about specific room concerns, I'd be more than happy to check it or have one of our certified staff check it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next we have Larry. Any questions, Dr. Miller?
Thanks, folks.
Count it as a gift, Larry. All right, we have our Director of Technology, Rich.
Okay, we're gonna start down here.
I'm just curious about technology, making sure we will have everything in place for teachers to have time to, if the board does decide to move forward, actually have time in classrooms to play with some of the technology, cameras. One concern I do have is having cameras. I know this is great to show the board area, but certainly there's some privacy concerns that could potentially come up if you can see the entire classroom. Someone might not realize their shirt's not all the way down as they're sitting, and it's being broadcast in people's houses, or there's disruption in class. So certainly want to make sure that we're thinking through those best practices for technology as well, and providing that support for teachers. So making sure we have everything in place if the board votes next week to bring it back in person, actually in hand with enough time for teachers to try it out, and B, just thinking of, will we have guidelines in place with best practices for technology to make sure we're just giving those tips for teachers.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, because we have mobile devices both for teachers and students, we're in really good shape there. I mean, just as a district, you know, since March, it's been one long technical emergency. So I feel like, you know, we've been responsive to that. So the teachers at this point all have laptops if they chose. There were a handful that chose not to. All the classrooms have desktops with the exception of we allowed teachers to take desktops home if they wanted. So they would be responsible to bring those back. But I think from just having the core technology they're going to need to teach, their laptops will have cameras. They'll be able to teach even today, like they could come in right now. Additionally, we're ordering more web cameras. So that's one of the things I think may go before the board in February. And the placement of those cameras is maybe a larger discussion. So I know, you know, the talk about behind the rooms might be one thing. You know, the ones that we're talking about could be connected to the device itself, or we can put them elsewhere in the room. So maybe that's a larger discussion we need, but I feel like we'll be in really good shape.
So will those additional webcams be in by March 1 or not?
I'll have an answer tomorrow. Well, we have roughly 100 that are on hand now. We know we went out and checked and did find different cameras that we could get. And then subsequently, we've put together a list of the cameras we'd like to consider. And then I have something out to vendors that is due back 2 o'clock tomorrow for us to know exactly what that availability is. But overall, we can get 1,000 cameras in that time frame of some sort.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a quick question. So, this is a lot of technology, you know, that's being thrown at teachers. It's necessary for the time that we're living in. But I heard some people say at the beginning when we were hearing the different presentations that teachers are going to be teaching in their classrooms, but also virtually. And so I'm wondering, are we gonna provide some additional training to teachers? Because what I've heard from not some of our teachers, but just teachers in general who are back, that it can be difficult to learn how to do all of that. And so I feel like that's one of those things that has the potential to add to the anxiety around coming back and learning how to do new things.
Yeah, so I think Dr. Parker touched on that as well. And, it's not the ideal situation. I think we would all agree with that. I mean, even, so we've been conducting our meetings virtually, and now many of us, I met Dr. Parker really for the first time the other day. So, it's so much nicer to be in person, but I think there's a pandemic and it's put all of us on our back foot in a way. But certainly, I think we have two instructional technology specialists. We have a group of instructional support leaders, I believe is what the acronym is for ISL. But there is staff along with Ms. Davenport that can assist and just guide people in what's the best practice for that. Again, I think it's not ideal, but I think the nice thing is now, to me, the more difficult method of teaching is virtual, if that makes sense. So now all of our teachers have basically since March learned, how am I going to teach virtually with the tools that I have? And then to have students in the classroom with them is actually potentially going to be a little bit easier even, so I can stand here and engage this equipment, but I can also look at the different people in the room. So I think that's the thing. But I think, the desire will be to give everyone every resource that they can have and to go along with the technology that really they've already been using for a long time.
Actually, this is actually a quick question. I just want to keep my son honest. So everything he does is on his Chromebook, right? He doesn't have any books, doesn't need any books, won't need any books.
At this point,
I'm
we've
just
got
making
all the
sure he's
resources.
honest.
Yeah, so
That's what you told me. I'm just.
yes,
I don't see that many books in there.
yeah. So so many things have happened in a positive way. I mean, the pandemic is a terrible thing, but it has positioned us in a way that our learning has moved forward. We've taken a situation that's challenging and we've risen to that occasion and moved our district in a direction that's positive. So now all the teachers are using all these technical tools. All the students are using those technical tools. And really what we're talking about is coming back in person and having this engagement, but still with all these tools that, they're the 21st century tools. We're doing our project-based learning, all the things that we've wanted to do. But yeah, all the stuff can be on the Chromebooks. He's got, Canvas and Clever and, Big Idea Math and whatever else you're using.
All right, thank you so much. Sarah, thank you for waiting patiently. We are going to start on this thing for us.
Hey, Dr. Field. I just want to clarify something that I thought I heard. There are going to be teachers that just don't feel comfortable coming back. Like students are having that elective parents are declaring whether or not they're going to come back. I think I heard you say that teachers with conditions of doctor's permission or cannot come back and teach virtually, but those that do not will need FMLA. Am I correct in that?
So let me clarify that. So as it stands right now, we currently don't have a lot of public health signs that would disqualify anyone from coming to work outside of like severe medical conditions based upon the mitigation factors that we have in place. So but the thing is, we have to make sure that we at least have the conversation with our staff members who say that they believe they have a medical condition that may preclude them from coming in person teaching. If that is the case, which has happened already in some cases, what we do is we engage in an interactive process. And so we communicate with the medical provider. And we have not had medical providers telling us that the mitigation factors that we use create any additional risk factor for the general public. I would also state that when we have staff members that are able to go out to the public to do simple things like going to the store, going to restaurants, we are safer than many of those places that persons are going in the public. We will be asking that staff members work with us as much as possible. But if staff members are saying that they cannot come back because they are fearful, then they're going to have to take leave at that point. The reason we went in this direction, as Dr. Davis has explained, is that we really want to try to limit the disruption that will happen with students if we create a different virtual teaching course. At this point, it would be incredibly disruptive, and it works best to actually have people come back so that we can keep rosters the same.
I did want to go back to a question that I asked about teachers traveling. Can you be a little, give me a little more information about that, or what the CDC says about people who travel if they have to quarantine?
So currently, most of the travel restrictions from the CDC really deal with international travel, because the United States as a whole, in terms of the domestic travel, we're pretty much at the same levels of risk at this point. It is the international travel, about 32 countries that are where the nationals that are coming from those countries are currently restricted from flying into the United States unless they meet particular categories of kinship. Certain resident nationals can come back, but when they do come back into the country, CDC is asking that people quarantine when they come back. We'll try to at least get tested within 3 to 5 days of arrival into the United States. So if we have anybody, I think we need to have some additional discussion about that. If we do have anybody that's traveling, I believe we should follow the CDC guidelines and say if they're coming back in, they should be tested within 3 to 5 days of arrival, and they should make sure that they are quarantined for at least 10 to 14 days.
Dr. Bowen, I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned earlier that there can already be some difficulty with finding subs. And so one of the things I'm wondering about is that, you know, if we have that scenario, what if classrooms end up without a teacher? I mean, I know we probably can't combine classrooms, but is that something that it has been talked about? Is there some sort of a plan for when buildings find themselves with too many students and not enough teachers?
Currently, we're working through a couple of different scenarios where we're trying to think about expanding the number of permanent subs we have in the district. Currently, 6 of our schools have permanent subs, ranging from 1 to 3 permanent subs in that building. So we will be looking at the cost, and we're right now investigating whether CARES Fund could potentially help us purchase through ESS additional resources so that we can put additional permanent subs in each building.
Okay, if we do run into that scenario and teachers have to quarantine, are they not going to go home and remotely teach, or are they just going to be at home quarantine, not doing anything? I'm just trying to, understand.
If the teacher does not have any type of debilitating medical condition associated while they're in quarantine, the expectation is that they will teach, and that we will have either a guest teacher or we will have an aide in the classroom to provide any kind of on-site support for the instruction.
Mr. Boyd, to follow up from Dr. Paul Walker's question about subs, I know I raised this to Dr. Davis already, so I really encourage us to figure out how to have permanent subs in each building, X number, because it does help. Because personally, for a teacher's sake and a building's sake, even if they're not needed for a certain day, there's always a place to meet them, whether it's at lunch, breakfast, hallways, bathroom monitoring, making sure hand sanitizers, refill, whatever the case may be. But it also helps with knowing how the school operates with the various procedures, cleaning and keeping kids healthy and safe. And so when they're in one building at one time, it does help. So I would really encourage us to figure out, because I know we've heard from plenty of teachers about what will happen if I'm absent or going to be sick. And we already are short subs, and there's a huge fear of combining classes and taking over plan periods and all those things. So I really encourage us to figure out a way to financially make it happen where we could have subs be in the building permanently by X number of people who are generally absent. because I do believe that we probably have possibly some positions vacated still that have not been filled, teaching positions for the year, or all of them still been filled to use some of those dollars from trying to grow the budget, but certainly I don't know if there's money to find. So I'll get off my soapbox about that, but I really think to find that would be nice for next week's meeting. The other question is just with the mandate of quarantine, if Lisa Stump can chime in about the legal aspect, since the CDC is not mandating it, they're only suggesting it, if we can legally require, St. Louis County is not mandating any quarantine as well, because spring break traveling is coming, and I'm sure there are teachers who will be traveling, and so I just want Lisa to chime into that aspect as well from a board level to make sure that legally, if that is the direction we wanted to go, we are legally sound to say you must mandate it or must quarantine, because right now the CDC and St. Louis County are not requiring it, they are suggesting those types of things, so. No, I know. I'm saying not to make a decision of whether or not they're going to. We just have Lisa run through that as well from a legal perspective. To provide that information to teachers at the board, that would be helpful for next week.
Dr. Martin, you were talking about the teacher who has been exposed or at positive?
No, say a teacher goes to travel to Mexico over spring break. And there's some guidance out there from the CDC, but there's not a mandate right now that says you must do that in some places. Actually, the United States has the highest cases almost everywhere, so it's almost unsafe to travel in the United States than it is internationally. But certainly, just want to check with legal if we can mandate people, or because some people don't have, sick time gets into all of those types of things. If it's a self-imposed quarantine versus a mandatory quarantine. So I would just like legal to give us some opinions on that as well. As we get to spring break, I want to also communicate that to family as well. If they choose to travel, what will be our policy in terms of what we're asking them to do as an honor system or what? Just being able to communicate transparency about what we're going to ask folks to do, because it's inevitable that people will travel. Thank you.
In the event that we have a breakout of COVID in our school, and say, tell me what we would do if it was a student or a teacher, or let's say student or adult in the building. What's the protocol? What are we going to do?
I mean, possibly, depending upon what happens through the process of contact tracing, we may have to have a class quarantine, and then we would then figure out how to adapt the learning process for that class at that point. If we have an adult, again, through the process of contact tracing, we would look and try to ascertain what were the levels of exposure and in what areas of the building were they exposed. When I have spoken to other colleagues in other districts, both in Missouri, in St. Louis County, and on the East Coast, it really is a case-by-case basis whether a particular situation would rise to the level where you quarantine a classroom versus you quarantine a wing, or even larger. But you have to just go through the contact tracing process first to make sure that you're really identifying what the exposure risks were at that point.
I just have one question. How are we addressing the possible issues that may arise with us opening back school with teachers and support staff in regards to mental health and social emotional?
So we currently have our EAP programs for all staff members, and they are able to access initial sessions for free before there are any costs associated with that. And we are, I think, when I think about the work of both Ms. Amy Cacciatore and Stan Brown, they've been very consistent in making sure that resources are sent out so people know about that. We also have employees that, they're calling into, Ms. Donna Troy, myself, to ask about things, and we try to make sure we can direct them to the appropriate resources.
Okay, thank you. So anybody else have anything that I can? So I just kind of want to go back through the board, just to see if you guys have any additional questions for anybody that has not been called. Because I believe, we're getting down to lowering our list. So I'm gonna start on this end and then go down. Sound good?
I just have one question. I don't know who to reply. I mean, we can start from there. Okay, thank you, Dr. Graves. The question is, I thought I heard someone say that we wouldn't be redoing schedules, but then I thought someone said for elementary, it's going to be separated out by virtual and in person and redoing schedules. Did I mishear or misread that slide?
You heard Ms. Santana Hurd was talking about the early year program and specifically the uniquely separate program itself. You know, we've had this conversation in our principal meetings in particular when it comes to pre-K through 8th grade. The high school is where I really get worried, you know, with schedule changes. And then to middle school to a great extent as well. Mr. Harris mentioned that, you know, also there's some challenges there. So when you begin to change those schedules, that's when you can get into a lot of issues, especially at the high school level. So, you know, the principal supervisors are going to be already are working with those pre-K through 8th grade schools to see what's the best scenario. Right now, we feel like the best, you know, possible scenario that we have is that teachers do the virtual and, you know, the in-person simultaneously without changing student schedules because it's at least restricted for student versus the teacher.
Can we go to the slideshow if possible, the one of the elementary, while someone else asking a question? I just want to go back to where, to be very clear to the community and us, I believe it said elementary or PK or kindergarten through 2, 3, 5 slide. It said there would be virtual schedule, in-person schedule, and the students would have different schedules. That's why I just want to be very clear about communication about, are we doing it or not doing it? Because I heard one reason we're not seeing relationships, but then on the slide I thought it said, because I wrote it down specifically, because you all know I love concurrent model so much. When I saw that, I said, oh, maybe they switched their minds.
So at this point in time, we are planning on the concurrent teaching pre-K through 5. As we've said many times, in addition to this, I guess, decision.
There's no graphics on it, Kevin, sorry.
Okay, the possibility of students even being quarantined. And there are other districts that actually have, you know, a virtual teacher and then they have an in-person teacher. A benefit of this concurrent is that the kids who have to, you know, go home, they can continue their education. If you have to be quarantined, there are students that then literally did not get any education for 2 weeks. That is problematic because they're not a virtual student. So when we think about that as well, we are really thinking about the benefit of the students. So if they have to go home, they can still access the instruction. As far as the schedules go, we are changing the daily schedule. Dr. Martin, I don't know if that may have been confusing in the way that it was presented. Okay. Because currently, right now, all of our virtual in K through 5, it starts at 9 o'clock.
Is that what you're looking for, Dr. Martin?
It might have been this one, it might have been on that. No, it's on the bottom. And I thought it specifically was primary internet, that's why I was, so. Maybe that's the last one. Maybe was it? I don't know, which one you just said? I don't know. Anyways, I swear I heard it, that's why I wrote it down, but maybe I'm delusional. Then when I'm bored looking at me like I.
Well, we did say like the schedule would change. You know, so that's an important piece for, you know, parents to understand.
So that may have been the piece too, that was because of the.
Okay.
Everyone else looking crazy, so keep on going.
So please make sure he gets the presentation and he'll send an email out to
You know
clarify
it.
his question.
You know it.
All right,
Yes, I do have a question for the principals, and I think this was at the elementary school. Did I hear that breakfast is only 2 minutes? And it also explains to me how the meal pass works. And then also, how can you go outside the have? Okay.
All right, so I can speak for Walnut Grove Elementary as far as breakfast. We, students, well, the start time is 9:20. So students will enter the building at 9:05 And so breakfast would be 15 minutes in between then. But of course, obviously, what we're talking about is having a stop time of serving breakfast. We'll have to work through the procedures and figure that out is how it operates in our building. But we will have kids come in at 9:05 and they will start receiving breakfasts then until 9:20. That's when the instructional time technically begins.
And then I can address the real pass. Pardon me? And I can address the real pass.
Okay, I saw the schedule, I'm almost feeling like Dr. Kevin. I know I saw it, it was only 10 minutes, right? And as a former principal, that can't, there's no way. Nor is that healthy for our students, but.
So, well, just speaking to that once again, scheduling as far as when students enter the building at 9:05 and eat till 9:20 at our location, we will have to figure out, obviously, with the circumstances, how it looks and how it works. But what we will say is breakfast is going to be pre-prepared, it's pre-bagged. We talked about routines for the students and coming in, learning how to open milks, open food, open silverware. We're just talking about efficiency, and it's just like anything else. We're going to have to develop a plan and practice it, and it will improve over time.
Oh,
Now, Dr. Thurman, that you saw that at Cross Keys. However, breakfast will be in the room waiting. It will be brought to the room at 9:10. They will get there at 9:15, but class actually doesn't begin until 9:30, 7:30, I'm sorry. So they actually will have 15 minutes. And at this level, with those kids having those bag lunches and just being in education for the last 26 years, 15 minutes is quite a bit of time for young people to eat. So we're just making a professional judgment on that.
But that's including distribution, but I know you guys will work it out.
Yes, ma'am.
But I just want to make sure that we are not forcing our kids, and parents would be concerned about that as well, trying to get them fed.
Yes, ma'am. Trust me, they can eat 3 breakfasts in 15.
Okay.
Dr. Thurman,
Yes,
did you want me to address your PE question?
yes, okay,
So there will be instances where if outside, that the teacher may say to virtual students, we're going to do cardio. I need you to check your heart rate. So for the next 20 minutes, go do something that's going to elevate your heart rate, then come back on screen. Well, I take the students who are in person outside, we do this, and then we come back in. Same kind of thing in the classroom. We can't and won't expect students the entire day to stay on Zoom, right, and watch what in-person is doing. So when we say concurrent, if whole group instruction is going on, direct instruction is going on, everybody will be present. If there's small group time, because the teacher is not going to be talking the entire time. So when there's small group time, they may say, okay, come back in 30 minutes, or put on a clock and say, we're going to come back in 45 minutes. And so the virtual students, in much the same way that's happening now, will go do whatever it is and then come back while the teacher in person may be working with students that are in the actual classroom. Okay.
And I just wanted to speak to that too. So I know it's all got to get worked out, but for me, it's a little concerning that we're gonna go tell kids to go do something for 20 minutes to get your heart rate up, not knowing if kids are at home with adults who can supervise what the something is, or if the child has the, the capacity to like judge, like this is the safe thing for me to do, or I'm gonna go outside. They told me to go outside, so I wonder if there should be some more thinking about our potential liability for directing kids to do something, and we're not there to really supervise.
No, absolutely. And I just gave that as an off the cuff. We would never say, go outside and run down the street and come back in. And no, please rest assured, we would never do that. I just gave that as a quick example. We would have parameters and the teachers would provide, hey, here are some things that you might be able to do. Okay.
You want to know about the meal? Park container. So for currently we're doing all meals are being virtual, all students are virtual. So we
don't have to worry about compliance. So with USDA and DESE, they make sure that we identify that there's a meal, so we can claim that as a meal and be reimbursed for that. When the students come back in person, so there's gonna be some virtual, some in person, we're gonna be delivering meals on Fridays. So all students will be home on Fridays. We will be delivering those meals to the virtual students on Fridays, because during the week, they're gonna be so busy making meals during the school day that they're not gonna have time to do the virtual. So we're gonna deliver 5 days breakfast and lunch on Fridays to the virtual students. But in order to be able to claim those meals, we have to identify them as that only our virtual students are getting meals, so that our in-person students aren't gonna go and get another, they've already eaten their meals. And they are gonna have meals sent home for them on Fridays, but we can't give them a whole box of meals for the next week. So we have to identify our virtual learners with the pass. Now, if they don't have the pass, we're not gonna turn them away. We just won't be able to claim that meal.
Yeah, oh, no. All right, done. Okay, everybody take a deep breath. I just want to say again, thank you on behalf of the board for the work that you have put into it. And I want to say to our community that's listening, I hope that you see and hear that this staff has really been working to make sure that we try and get all the questions answered. The other thing I want to point out is that if you have noticed, every board member has been involved in asking questions, which tells you that your board is interested in this reentry plan, and that we are not taking it lightly, and that we are studying it, and we truly have concerns about how we go back, and that our kids are safe, our students are safe, the community is safe. We have another question on the floor.
I'm sorry, and I guess hopefully it's quick, but I guess my question is, if when we go back, and I think Sheila asked this a long time ago, when we go back, what is that determining factor that we were going to use to basically say this is not working and we need to go back to virtual? What is that thing that we're looking for that would be the key that we have to go back? And maybe if we don't have that answer now, I know I would not be able to give a vote come next week if we don't have that.
So this is a work session. And, when I look at all the districts that Dr. Jadali is on the board and around this region in particular, I don't know of a lot of places that have started and then they stop. They've had, I know, and I've talked to every superintendent today, in fact, superintendents have had to quarantine whole classes. There's been some schools that have had to, sort of shut down. So I think it's, I don't know if there is an answer to say what will make us all have to go back to virtual. We have 2%, everybody gets the vaccine. My hope is that that number will begin to increase even more. We need to get to 70 to 80% some sort of herd immunity. So my hope is that once we start back, we can continue on. I think the big question for me is what it looks like when we get to August, and will we be able to go back full on? That's my hope. I know that the scientists have been telling us that this summer we ought to have like June, July, be in a better place. But there's a hard issue with the through line for the vaccines. Supply and demand aren't meeting. So I don't know if we'll have an answer next week with what that will look like. But what I can tell you is that, as Dr. Boyd said earlier, if there are classes we have to quarantine, well, we're going to be really vigilant. We'll have Lisa to weigh in on those quarantine methods, so we make sure we are following the best practice for us, right? Whatever CDC says, we'll look at those recommendations, but also what makes the most sense. I can tell you that a couple places I've talked with and have visited, like I said, district, they have some modified quarantine methods in place. Some students who, if they had on a mask and they were, even if they were within a certain amount of feet, then they were able to still come to school, but couldn't go to any kind of after-school activities or any athletic activities. They were, within their modified quarantining method. So we'll have to look at it and do the best we can. My hope is that if we start back and you all say, yes, we can go back, that we'll be able to work hard, figuring it out. We only have another quarter plus about 2 weeks. So we have about 11 and a half, 12 more weeks of school period. So my hope is that once we start, we can figure out how to keep everybody as safe as possible. But if we have to quarantine some classes or school, we'll do just that.
And quarantine's a mitigation strategy, which we think of as a positive thing, not as a negative. Sure. It is a mitigation strategy. Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry. Last question. So I wanted to know, is there going to be any parent advisory meetings before we render a decision at the next meeting? Just so that they can, our parents.
I had it's funny you said that. You must have just got a text to our email. But I can tell you that the last meeting we had that was virtual, I had one of my superintendent parent advisory members. I won't call her name, but I'm sure she's watching. She's very active, and I'm glad because she's going to ask great questions. Will we have another advisory meeting before the board makes a decision? I won't feel compelled to do it, and I can tell you, we've been put a lot on people's plates. So we're working hard to try to bring our advisory group in and at least have voice and, see what kinds of things they're saying. I can tell you that we did poll students today. Kevin Hampton, the last numbers I got, we had about 1,400 students already within the last 24 hours who've gone on with the thought exchange to see, who wants to come back. About 60% of them, of the 1,400 that we had gotten earlier today, I'm sure the number is bigger now. And we just put it out just for students to get a feel of how students would feel. So, students are, I think, pretty ready to come back. So we'll see if we can't work out at least the superintendent's advice, parent advisory. I have about 20 parents who are very active and consistent for the last 3 or 4 years. So we'll see if we can pull them together before Wednesday of next week. I'll put it out there publicly so that we can at least get their voices at the table again. Yeah, the last time I met with them was right before Christmas. We try to meet at least once a quarter, and so we met in December, but I'll try to get that done. I'm gonna do my best. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good. Again, I want to say thank you, and I want to thank the principals who are not in the room. Thank you so much for the work that you've done, and any other staff members who are not in the room right now. Just want to acknowledge you. And I also want to say thank you to Kevin for doing the thought exchange with our administrators. The numbers came at 21 to 21. That didn't help at all. Thank you again. Again, we will be voting on this for community, teachers, students on February 10th. So at this time, if there are no more questions, please, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah. Please talk to the vote.
Dr. Martin?
Yes.
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 Thank you, Dr.